Chapter 24:55. Even with martial god Taihao's strength, he was helpless against the power of the calamity. When he learned that Ji Tianqing had come to his divine kingdom, he was excited and filled with joy and anticipation. The two of them met in the main hall of the divine palace. After exchanging a few pleasantries, Ji Tianqing asked about martial god Taihao's condition. After learning that martial god Taihao's injuries had stabilized and that the calamity's power was still slowly spreading, Ji Tianqing nodded to indicate that this was in line with his expectations. Thus, the two of them entered the secret room where martial god Taihao was in seclusion and began to dispel the calamity's power. Ji Tianqing activated the Skysmend Orb's light divine power and used a special healing method to slowly purify the demonic energy in Taihao's body. Strands of the calamity's black aura were gradually dispersed by the light divine power. Martial god Taihao could clearly feel that the pain was lessening, and the pressure on his divine body was decreasing. However, this was a long process that could not be accomplished overnight. Ji Tianqing used half a month to completely remove the calamity's black aura from martial god Taihao's body. That evening, the healing process finally ended. Ji Tianqing finished his spell and left the secret room first. Martial god Taihao meditated for a while before his mental state returned to normal. He hurried to the study to express his gratitude to Ji Tianqing. After thanking him, Ji Tianqing asked Taihao about the recent situation. Taihao reported, "Lord Kenshin, ever since you heavily injured the ancestral demon god, the news quickly spread throughout Dark North Mountain and the entire Shenwu continent. Shenwu continent was shocked, and the martial arts world praised this as a miracle that would be passed down for generations to come. The demons in Dark North Mountain were like dragons without a leader, and they had long since fallen into chaos. The demon army that had invaded our country had lost their morale and retreated in a sorry state. As they retreated, our soldiers chased after them with high morale and killed more than 1 million of them. The remaining 1,000,000 or so also had disagreements and disputes, and they split up and fled like a sheet of loose sand. Our soldiers are chasing after them and wiping out the fleeing devil army. I believe that they will soon return in triumph and reclaim all the lost land." Hearing up to here, Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "That's good. After this battle, the demon race will have no one to use. They won't be able to stir up any more waves. Without the primogenitor demon god and the few demon sages, the North Underworld Mountain would become a fish on the chopping block. The vast divine nation was about to recover its lost territory and needed a few more years to recuperate. When the time is right, you can lead the army into the North Underworld Mountain and completely exterminate the demon race." "Good." Martial god Taihao nodded his head in agreement. After he finished speaking, a hesitant look appeared on his face as he stammered. Ji Tianqing saw that his expression was strange, so he frowned and asked, "What's wrong? Is there anything else?" Martial god Taihao pursed his lips and said with a bitter smile, "Lord Kenshin, that was good news. Not long ago I received a piece of bad news. Didn't you kill martial god Tianju? Even Yi Lushui Qinjing, the first divine son and the fourth divine son died by your sword. Now, the vast divine nation is like a dragon without a head. The entire nation is wailing in grief and despair." When the divine emperors of the various empires heard the news of martial god Tianju's death, they established their own clans and took the opportunity to expand. Some divine emperors want to leave the divine nation, while others want to merge with other empires and become the new divine masters. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said, "Martial god Tianju's death and the divine nation's descent into chaos are within my expectations. How is that bad news?" Martial god Taihao shook his head and explained, "If that's all, then it's not bad news. However, what's worrying is that I received news from scouts that many Heaven Punisher battleships have been spotted in the Divine Nation's territory. Many Heaven Punisher warriors have already entered the Divine Nation's territory and taken over a large number of cities and territories." Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. He said coldly, "The Heaven Punisher actually went to invade the divine nation's territory? Those despicable and shameless B***stards. I killed martial god Tianju, but they took advantage of me." Martial god Taihao was also filled with righteous indignation. He cursed angrily, "That's right. Those bastards from the Heaven Punisher race are really B***stards. If it were any other time, I would definitely not sit by and do nothing. I would definitely send out an army to take over the divine nation's territory and not let the Heaven Punisher race succeed. However, you know the current situation. Our soldiers are busy chasing the demon race army and reclaiming the lost territory. They can't spare any time." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and comforted him with a calm expression. "It's okay. Let them do it for now. Don't forget how the demon race was defeated. So what if the Heaven Punisher race has taken over a large number of territories? After I kill General Fulong, the Heaven Punisher race will lose their leader and will quickly be defeated." "That's right." Martial god Taihao was energized and said with a burning gaze, "To catch bandits, first catch the leader. That's the logic." Ji Tianqing stopped talking about this matter and reminded him earnestly, "Taihao, now that the situation has just stabilized, you still have to be extra careful. Don't be in a hurry to go into seclusion to heal your injuries. Although the demon race is not a concern, the Heaven Punisher race is still the biggest threat. You should first supervise the soldiers to reclaim the lost territory and clear out the remaining demon race forces. Other than that, you have to pay close attention to the movements of the Heaven Punisher race and the demon race. Once you discover any news about the ancestor demon god, you have to inform me immediately." Martial god Taihao's expression changed slightly and he asked worriedly, "Lord Kenshin, you mean the ancestor demon god might recover from his injuries and make a comeback?" Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, "Even if he doesn't die, he won't be able to recover within 10 years. I just want you to keep an eye on him. Once there's any news about him, I will immediately go and kill him. I won't give him a chance." "Okay, I understand." Martial god Taihao was relieved and quickly nodded in agreement. Ji Tianqing stood up and walked to the door of the study. "I have other matters to attend to. I'll take my leave first." Martial god Taihao quickly stood up and bowed respectfully. "Farewell, Lord Kenshin." Ji Tianqing's clothes fluttered in the wind as he strode out of the study and quickly left the Divine Kingdom. 8 days later, he left the Divine Kingdom of Taihao and returned to the Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower in the north of the Divine Ruins. Coincidentally, when he was about to enter the tower, a ray of light flew over from the sky. Whoosh! The ray of light landed in his palm. It was a communication jade slip. When he lowered his head and saw the mark on the jade slip, his expression immediately changed. His eyes were filled with anticipation. This jade slip had come from someone he had not expected. It was actually from martial god Luo Shui. When he injected his divine sense into the jade slip and read the message inside, he was even more shocked, revealing a pleasantly surprised expression. Chapter 2456. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao had always wanted to find a divine pearl to help Yun Yao break through to the immortal state. Not only did he send out the disciples of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to scout for information, he also asked the 7 god princes to help and use the power of the vast divine kingdom to search for clues about the divine pearl on the continent. Helping Yun Yao find the divine pearl as soon as possible became Ji Tianqing's biggest wish and most urgent task. But now everything was easily solved. Martial god Luo Shui sent him a message saying that she had just found a divine pearl. This was definitely a pleasant surprise for Ji Tianqing. He didn't even care about entering the divine pagoda and hurriedly woke up Yun Yao in the Sword World. Yun Yao was cultivating in seclusion in peaceful Earth City. Her injuries had already healed and her strength was slowly increasing. Hearing Ji Tianqing's call, she hurriedly flew out of the Sword World. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, Yun Yao appeared in the sky and stood beside Ji Tianqing. She looked around and found that they were deep in the divine ruins. The entrance to the divine pagoda was not far away. Therefore, she looked at Ji Tianqing in confusion and asked, "Tianqing, why did you call me? Did you just leave the divine pagoda?" Ji Tianqing shook his head. "No, I just came back here and was about to enter the divine pagoda." Yun Yao was even more confused. She asked, "Did you fly all the way back here? Why didn't you use the divine pagoda's secret key to return to the divine pagoda directly?" Ji Tianqing smiled and explained, "I came back from the vast divine kingdom. I wanted to check the situation along the way and exterminate some demon race remnant." "I see." Yun Yao finally understood his intention. She asked with concern, "You already fought with the ancestor fiend god? What was the result?" Ji Tianqing told Yun Yao about what had happened previously, as well as the process of him severely injuring the ancestral demon god. Yun Yao was very gratified when she heard that. She said expectantly, "Since the ancestral demon god was heavily injured by the divine sword, and its heavenly demon body was destroyed, then even if it didn't die, it would still be heavily injured. In the short term, it won't be able to stir up trouble again." "Exactly." Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, "The destruction of the Dark North Mountain is imminent. The demons are no longer a concern. Now, our greatest threat is the Heaven Punisher race. This matter needs to be discussed at length. There's no need to rush." Yun Yao exhorted and asked, "By the way, why did you wake me up just now?" Ji Tianqing took Luo Shui's communication jade slip and handed it to her. He said with a smile, "I was about to enter the divine tower when I received a communication jade slip. Guess who sent it?" Yun Yao held the communication jade slip and carefully observed it for a moment. Her body immediately shook and she asked in disbelief, "This is from the Divine Master?" Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. "That's right. She sent me a message to tell me a piece of good news." Yun Yao was very excited. She said expectantly, "The Divine Master has already disappeared for a few months. During this time, there has been no news of her, and we couldn't contact her. Now, there's finally news of her. What kind of good news is it?" Ji Tianqing did not keep her in suspense and said directly, "Luo Shui sent a message saying that she fought a great battle with General Dragon subduing. Unfortunately, she lost and was heavily injured. Before she escaped, she ordered the last 2 Saint Emperors to surrender to the Heaven Punisher race in order to prevent the people of the Divine Nation from being slaughtered. Only then did the battle end. After that, she hid in the endless celestial sea to recuperate. 2 months ago, she finally recovered from her injuries, and when she returned to the Shenwu continent, she found that the situation had become completely chaotic. She knew that she could not change the world or kill her enemies on her own. Thus, she placed all her hopes on you." Yun Yao listened attentively and finally understood the whole story. At the same time, she could vaguely guess the good news that Ji Tianqing was talking about. Ji Tianqing continued, "Luo Shui did not reveal herself. She secretly rushed to the depths of the ruins of God and found a way to enter the tombs of the gods. After going through many hardships and trials, she finally obtained a divine orb in the tomb of Goddess Yaoguang." Hearing this, Yun Yao realized that the truth was exactly as she had guessed. She immediately revealed a look of pleasant surprise, and her eyes became even brighter. As expected, only the Divine Master knows where the divine orb is hidden. Her divine nation has already been destroyed, and she escaped with heavy injuries, but she did not forget to search for the divine orb for me. I owe her a great debt of gratitude, so I must help her kill her enemies and subdue the territory of Luo Shui Divine Nation. Yun Yao's gaze and tone were very resolute, and her gratitude towards Luo Shui had reached its peak. Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement and said solemnly, "Although the Devil race and the Heaven Punisher race are powerful, we still have the help of Tianju Divine Nation. But now, martial god Tianju is dead, and the ancestral demon god is half dead. Only the Heaven Punisher race has not been dealt with. As long as we work together, we can quickly kill General Fu Long and completely destroy the Heaven Punisher race. Yun Yao pondered for a moment, and her heart was filled with anticipation. She then asked, Tianxing, what kind of divine orb do you think the divine master obtained from Goddess Yaoguang's tomb is? Ji Tianxing shook his head and said with a smile, How would I know? The divine orbs that you obtained before were all special powers like vast sea, star, longevity, earthly spirit, and wind and fire. As for the divine orb that Luo Shui found, it's most likely an even stronger power. Pausing for a moment, he frowned and said, Speaking of which, it's strange. When I first entered the Mausoleum of the Gods, I also investigated Goddess Yaoguang's tomb. At that time, I sensed that there was a mysterious power hidden in the depths of the tomb, and it seemed to be related to the soul. I didn't expect that mysterious power to be a divine orb. Yun Yao thought for a moment and comforted him. Back then, you were only at the primordial spirit realm, so how could you have seen the truth and secrets of Goddess Yaoguang's tomb? It's already incredible that you could sense the mysterious power hidden in the tomb. Ji Tianxing nodded thoughtfully. He laughed at himself and said, Maybe I made a mistake. Yun Yao smiled and said, All right, don't think too much. Let's quickly contact the Divine Master and see what she decide. Ji Tianxing pointed at the communication jade slip in her hand and said, Luo Shui said that she suffered serious injuries in order to obtain that divine orb. She's currently recuperating outside the Mausoleum of the God. Let's return to the Divine Pagoda first and check on Aku and everyone else's situation before going to the Mausoleum of the Gods to find Luo Shui. Yun Yao was worried about Luo Shui's injuries, and she was also concerned about the divine orb. She wanted to go find Luo Shui directly. But on second thought, she had already returned to the entrance of the Divine Pagoda, so how could she not go in and see everyone? Anyway, it wouldn't take much time. Thus, she followed Ji Tianxing into the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes Pagoda and quickly returned to the 6th level. The dark and cold distorted spacetime was as silent as ever. But Ji Tianxing's sharp senses discovered that there were wisps of flames floating in the dark space. There were dark gold, pure gold, dark red, and light purple. The mysterious flames of different colors were like thousands of threads that slowly flowed in the air. They contained incomparably powerful and astonishing divine power. Chapter 2457. Ji Tianxing strolled in the distorted spacetime. He reached out to touch the thousands of flames beside him, and the smile on his face grew wider. Yun Yao also noticed something and quickly asked, Tianxing, what's going on? Is it related to Ku? Ji Tianxing nodded and smiled. That's right. These thousands of mysterious flames are actually divine flames. If I'm not wrong, Ku has probably broken through to the immortal state. And these divine flames are the divine power that seeped out when she broke through to the immortal state. Yun Yao was shocked and said in disbelief, Is that so? Ku has broken through to the immortal state so quickly? Ji Tianxing shook his head gently and said, Actually, it's not that fast. We've been out for a few months, and she has been cultivating in seclusion here for more than 10 years. Don't forget, she has received the inheritance of the demon race's divine king, which is that mysterious fire bird. Even this Jiutian 10 Absolutes Tower is completely under her control. The time she has been cultivating in seclusion here adds up to almost 100 years. It's natural for her to break through to the immortal state. Yun Yao was relieved, and she looked relieved and expectant. If that's really the case, that's great. We're about to deal with the Heaven Punisher race. Ku has broken through to the immortal state now, and we'll have another powerful helper. Ji Tianxing turned to look at her and pretended to be confused. Hey, Ku was weaker than you before, but now she broke through to the immortal state before you. Aren't you jealous? Yun Yao rolled her eyes at him and said, We're all on the same side. What's there to be jealous about? Besides, everyone's opportunities and luck are different. Why should we compare? Her life is already hard enough. This is heaven's compensation for her. Unlike me, I don't work very hard, but I always meet people who help me. I'm the luckiest. Hearing Yun Yao's words, Ji Tianxing quickly comforted her. Yao Yao, don't think like that. We've been through so much to get to where we are today. I know the price you've paid and the effort you've put in. As they spoke, the two of them flew into the depths of the distorted space-time. They saw a ball of fire in front of them. When looked at from afar, it was a ball of blazing divine flames that was mixed with gold, crimson red, and light violet. The divine flame rose fiercely and danced in the air. It condensed into a vivid and lifelike divine bird pattern that was faintly discernible. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao hurriedly flew closer and saw a woman in a red dress sitting in the divine fire. It was Jiku. Compared to before, the Jiku's appearance had changed slightly. She seemed to have grown taller, her figure taller, and her face more perfect. Her temperament, in particular, had undergone a great change. Even though she was cultivating with her eyes closed, her entire body was exuding a holy aura, and an invisible pressure was being emitted from her. It was as if she was no longer that ordinary girl, but a god that stood high above the 9 heavens, looking down on all living beings. Without a doubt, Jiku had broken through to the divine realm. The path of the demon god that she had mastered was even more profound and unfathomable. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao didn't wake her up. They both raised their heads and looked at the divine bird pattern that was faintly discernible in the air. They saw that the crimson and gold divine bird pattern had an unusually beautiful appearance. Its feathers were gorgeous, and the feathers on its tail were even more beautiful. In the entire Shenwu continent, there was no other bird that could be compared to this divine bird pattern. Whether it was demon beasts, spirit beasts, or some divine beasts and birds, none of them were as majestic and perfect as this divine bird. Yun Yao's eyes were filled with amazement. She only felt that it was unbelievable. Ji Tianxing stared at the divine bird pattern for a moment and suddenly thought of something. He immediately revealed a look of realization and couldn't help but laugh. Yun Yao glanced at him and quickly asked, Tianxing, you've been to the divine realm and seen all kinds of divine beasts. You must know this divine bird, right? Ji Tianxing smiled and nodded. He explained, that's right. This divine bird is the legendary immortal bird, the king of birds that is as famous as the divine dragon, the phoenix. Phoenix? Yun Yao was shocked and also came to a realization. She nodded and said, so the legendary immortal phoenix is so perfect and gorgeous. It seems that the divine bird that Ku saw in her dream is the phoenix. Only the phoenix can become the divine king of the demon race and live in the 33 grotto heavens. It has the divine power of the 9 transformations indestructible. At this point, Yun Yao paused and asked in confusion, by the way, isn't the phoenix known as the immortal divine bird? Why did the divine king of the demon race die? Ji Tianxing spread his hands and said, how would I know? How can there be an immortal existence in the world? No matter how powerful the divine king is, it's impossible. Yun Yao nodded thoughtfully. I guess only Ku can uncover this secret. At this moment, Jiku, who had been cultivating in seclusion, sensed their auras. She ended her cultivation and slowly opened her eyes. When she saw Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao standing in front of her, she quickly stood up and greeted them in surprise. Big brother Tianxing, eldest senior sister, why are you back? Jiku smiled. Her bright eyes and white teeth were indescribably beautiful. She was as warm and gentle as the spring breeze. Her divine and majestic aura also dissipated a little. She was now like Yun Yao, a goddess with a noble and holy temperament. She made people feel ashamed of their inferiority and worship her. However, her nature and temperament were different from Yun Yao's. Yun Yao had a cold personality. She was like the bright moon in the night sky and the orchid at the top of a snowy mountain. On the other hand, Jiku's personality was more naive and lively. After inheriting the path of the demon god and controlling the mysterious flame, she was more enthusiastic and energetic. Ji Tianqing looked at her with relief. He reached out and touched her head. He smiled and said, "We came back to see how you're doing. Cuckoo, now that you've inherited the divine path of the Phoenix Divine King and broken through to the martial god realm, you've been reborn from the ashes. You've truly transformed." Yunyao also smiled and nodded in agreement. She said, "Those who haven't entered the god realm are all mortal beings and ordinary ants. Only when you enter the god realm can you jump out of this world and have a limitless future and possibilities. Cuckoo, congratulations on entering the god realm and becoming the martial god." Jiku looked at Ji Tianqing and then at Yunyao. The excitement and joy hidden in her heart instantly dissipated. She pouted and said dejectedly, "I didn't expect you to already know. I wanted to give you a surprise." Ji Tianqing and Yunyao not only knew that she had broken through to the god realm, but they also guessed that she had inherited the divine path of the Phoenix Divine King. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao chuckled when they saw her reaction. "Ha ha! If we had known, we would have pretended that we didn't know anything. Cuckoo, you've already given us a big surprise. We're all happy for you." Chapter 2458. Ji Tianqing, Yunyao, and Jiku chatted happily for a long time. After they calmed down from their surprise and excitement, Ji Tianqing told them their next plan. "Today we have two joyous events. Cuckoo has successfully broken through to the deity realm, and Luo Shui has found a deity pearl. After we head to the cemetery of the gods and obtain the deity pearl, Yao Yao will also be able to break through to the deity realm. When that happens, the three of us and Luo Shui will be 4 martial gods, which will be enough to kill General Fu Long. Once General Fu Long dies, the Heaven Punisher tribe will be defeated and will be wiped out soon." Hearing Ji Tianqing's words, Yunyao and Jiku became excited as they saw a bright future ahead of them. The two of them believed that the Heaven Punisher tribe would be wiped out soon. The chaotic Shenwu continent would also be restored to peace. After that, Yunyao and Jiku remained where they were and had a private conversation. Ji Tianqing flew into the depths of the distorted spacetime alone to check on Hei Long, Qianyu, Bai Long, and Lan Kuan. Ever since Ji Tianqing had brought them into the distorted spacetime, they had been cultivating in seclusion and working hard to increase their strength. As for the results of their cultivation, they had not let down Ji Tianqing's expectations and had all reached the sage realm. Among them, Bai Long was the strongest as he had already recovered to the 6th level martial sage realm. Furthermore, his soul had recovered by more than half and had become more solid. Hei Long and Qian Yu's strengths were second as they were around the 4th level martial sage realm. Only Lan Kuan's strength was weaker as it was still at the 3rd level martial sage realm. Ji Tianqing was very satisfied with this and encouraged them before leaving them with a huge amount of cultivation resources. "Now that the situation in the continent is chaotic, I know that you can't stand the loneliness and don't want to be trapped here. You only want to go out and experience the storms. However, with your current strength, it will be difficult for you to help me. Thus, what you need to do is to continue cultivating until the day you break through to the deity realm." Before they left, Ji Tianqing warned them again and again. Black Dragon, Qian Yu, White Dragon, and Lan Kuan all nodded in understanding. Ji Tianqing then summoned Bai Long alone. He took out martial god Tianju's soul fragment from his spatial ring and gave it to him. "White Dragon, I've already killed martial god Tianju. These are his soul fragments. You've recovered quite well. If you refine these soul fragments, your soul will be able to recover by 70 to 80%. Then, you'll be able to condense a divine body and break through to the divine realm. I believe that you will not disappoint me." The White Dragon was filled with excitement. He stared at the divine soul fragment in disbelief and exclaimed, "Wow! Master, you're actually so valiant?" He had just broken through to the God realm not long ago, and he had already killed Tianju? This was simply too terrifying. However, Tianju, that old fellow, deserved to die. Back then, he was very disrespectful to you. If it weren't for Master's magnanimity, this disciple would have slapped him long ago. Now, he colluded with the ancestor fiend god and dared to go against Master. He was courting death. After saying that, Bai Long happily took the soul fragment and held it in his palm as if it was a treasure. He smiled and said, please rest assured, Master. This disciple will definitely refine Tianju's soul as soon as possible. When this disciple returns to the divine realm, I will follow Master and serve you. Go. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and waved his hand to signal him to leave. Bai Long hurriedly bowed and left. He returned to the dark corner and went into seclusion to cultivate. Ji Tianqing also turned and left to meet up with Yun Yao. All right, it's almost time. Let's go to the cemetery of the gods to find Luo Shui. He called out and was about to leave with Yun Yao. Ji Ke hurriedly followed and said, Brother Tianqing, senior sister, I also want to go to the cemetery of the gods with you. Now that I've broken through to the divine realm, I can help you. Ji Tianqing turned to look at her and said with a gentle expression, Cuckoo, don't worry. We're going to find Luo Shui to get the deity pearl, not to kill and steal. There won't be any danger. You just broke through to the divine realm not long ago, and your foundation in the divine realm is not stable yet. This is the most crucial time. You can stay here and cultivate with peace of mind. First, build a solid foundation. Otherwise, it will affect your future cultivation of the divine realm. After Ji Tianqing finished speaking, Yun Yao also tried to persuade Ji Ke. Ji Ke hesitated for a moment before nodding and agreeing to stay. However, she was still somewhat worried, and she warned Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao, Brother Tianqing, senior sister, even if the cemetery of the gods is not dangerous, you still have to be careful. After all, the situation in the Shenwu continent is so chaotic right now, and anything can happen. Yun Yao only smiled and nodded, not taking these words to heart. However, after Ji Tianqing heard this, he frowned slightly as a strange thought flashed through his mind. Of course, that ominous thought disappeared as soon as it appeared, and he quickly threw it to the back of his mind. After both parties waved goodbye, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao left the Jiutian 10 Extremes Tower. Whoosh! There was a flash of light, and the two appeared side by side outside the tower at the peak of a barren mountain. The sky was still dark, and the sun had yet to set. Although the two had been delayed for half a day in the tower, only a few moments had passed in the outside world. Yun Yao summoned the glazed fire dragon, and the two climbed onto its back and sped towards the south. The two were currently at the northernmost part of the ruins of God. The cemetery of the gods was located right in the middle of the ruins of God. The two places were not far apart, and with the glazed fire dragon's speed, it would only take half a day to reach them. Many years ago, Ji Tianqing had gone to the sky-gazing platform to participate in the Divine Kingdom exchange as the #1 God disciple of the Taihao Divine Kingdom. It was on that day that he reunited with Yun Yao on the sky-gazing platform. It was also that opportunity that he defeated the geniuses of the 3 divine kingdoms and gained the favor of the old man of the ruins of God. He was lucky enough to enter the cemetery of the god. Back then, when he explored the tomb of the goddess of Yaoguang in the cemetery of the gods, he had secretly made up his mind. One day, he would bring Yun Yao into the cemetery of the gods to explore the mysterious power in the tomb of the gods. And now, his goal was about to be realized. Unknowingly, 12 hours had passed. The night was about to dissipate and dawn was about to arrive. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stood on the back of the glazed fire dragon and looked at the mountains and valleys in front of them, their eyes full of anticipation. At this moment, their mood was like the scene of heaven and earth. The darkness was about to be dispelled, and the light was about to be ushered in. The sky-gazing platform was already in sight, and it was flickering with white light in the dark sky. Whoosh! The glazed fire dragon streaked across the sky like an aurora and arrived at the sky-gazing platform. Ji Tianqing looked down and found that the huge sky-gazing platform was empty. He released his divine sense and covered a radius of 2,000 miles to carefully check. In the end, there was no one around the sky-gazing platform, and there was no trace of Luo Shui. At this moment, a mysterious black shadow appeared in the sky in front of the glazed fire dragon. It was a tall and burly man in a black robe. His figure was a little blurry, and there was no aura fluctuation at all, as if he had merged with heaven and earth. A wide cloak covered his face, and only a pair of withered and old hands were exposed in the sleeves of the robe. Chapter 2459. Without a doubt, the mysterious black-robed man was the emissary of the divine ruins. Why have you trespassed into the forbidden area? He stared at Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao and asked in a dignified tone. An invisible divine pressure was emitted from his body and enveloped the glazed fire dragon, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Ji Tianqing and his wife looked at the emissary of the divine ruins and calmly cupped their hands. They explained, "Greetings, emissary of the divine ruins. We have no intention of offending you. We are only here to look for someone." The emissary of the divine ruins recognized Ji Tianqing and his body shook. He asked in surprise, "It's you? A few years ago, I led you into the cemetery of the god. At that time, you were only at the primordial soul realm. It's only been a few years, and you've already broken through to the god realm?" The emissary of the divine ruins was powerful, had a mysterious background, and had experienced the vicissitudes of life, so he did not show his emotions. However, when he saw that Ji Tianqing had reached the martial god realm, he was so shocked that he lost his composure. At the same time, he was even more certain of his original guess. He had guessed Ji Tianqing's true identity. Ji Tianqing nodded at the emissary of the divine ruins and cupped his hands. "Since Senior still remembers me then, can I ask Senior to make an exception and allow me to enter the cemetery of the gods?" The emissary of the divine ruins calmed down and said in a low and dignified tone, "Of course not. How can the rules of the divine ruins be changed?" Hearing his words, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao both frowned and looked at each other in confusion. Strange, the old man of the divine ruins guards the cemetery of the gods and refuses to make an exception. How did Luo Shui get in? The divine master must have used other methods or had some fortuitous encounter, right? After Yun Yao's reminder, Ji Tianqing remembered that Luo Shui seemed to have mentioned it in the communication jade slip. Thus, he asked the emissary of the divine ruins, "Senior, I can't wait a few decades to participate in the next Divine Kingdom exchange. However, I have to enter the cemetery of the gods to meet a very important person. If I'm not wrong, as long as I can defeat you, I'll be able to enter the necropolis of the gods, right?" The messenger of the divine ruins was taken aback for a moment before replying in an indifferent tone, "This is not a rule of the divine ruins. This old man will decide based on the situation. Whether or not I'll give you this opportunity is up to me." Ji Tianqing looked at him calmly and said in a firm tone, "In that case, please give me this opportunity." The emissary of the divine ruins looked at him quietly. After a moment of silence, he said in a deep voice, "Although you have once reached the peak of the divine Tao, you are still a divine Tao expert. However, you've just broken through to the deity realm and aren't my match. Don't seek your own humiliation." Ji Tianqing's expression did not change as he said confidently, "It seems that Senior doesn't know that I'm best at creating miracles." He. "You're very confident." The emissary of the divine ruins sneered. Ji Tianqing still refused to back down. He nodded and said, "That's right. With sufficient strength, why wouldn't he be confident?" The emissary of the divine ruins chuckled again, and said in a low voice, "Although you're an interesting kid, this old man doesn't intend to give you a chance." Ji Tianqing cupped his hands towards him and said indifferently, In that case, I can only offend you. It was obvious that he wanted to forcefully defeat the emissary of the divine ruins. The emissary of the divine ruins laughed loudly. Ha 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 ha. Kid, you're not only confident, you're also very arrogant. As he spoke, he slowly raised his palms and accumulated a vast amount of divine power in his body. He was about to release an attack that could destroy the heavens and earth. Ji Tianqing also formed a divine art as his entire body emitted a sacred golden light and an incomparably domineering aura. Under his instructions, Yun Yao retreated far away. Star-shattering fist. In the next moment, Ji Tianqing made the first move as he clenched his fists and punched towards the emissary of the divine ruins. Two mountain-sized fist shadows smashed down from the sky like meteors descending from the sky. At that moment, the dazzling starlight illuminated a radius of thousands of miles. The darkness was dispelled and the night sky became as bright as day. The emissary of the divine ruins also raised his arms. A pair of old and withered palms shot out endless divine light from his wide sleeves. Chaotic life. The colorful divine light was like a flood that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Thousands of shadows flashed through as if they were thousands of miniature versions of the people of the world. They contained the sorrow of the seven emotions and turned into a complex and powerful force. Bang! Bang! Amidst a deafening explosion, the star-shattering fist and the colorful divine light collided and exploded into light fragments that blotted out the sky. The violent and devastating shockwaves swept across a radius of thousands of miles like colorful ripples. In an instant, all the clouds in the sky around the ancient viewing platform were swept away. Even the nearby mountains and rivers were razed to the ground, causing smoke and dust to rise into the air. Yun Yao stood in the sky hundreds of miles away, circulating her energy to resist the shockwaves, and was unharmed. She stared at Ji Tianqing with worry and concern in her eyes. In the first exchange, Ji Tianqing and the emissary of the divine ruins were evenly matched. No one had the upper hand. The emissary of the divine ruins was a little surprised and couldn't help but exclaim, "Kid, you're quite capable. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant. Let's try this move again." As he spoke, the emissary of the divine ruins waved his palms and drew a dozen arcs in front of him, forming an ancient seal word the size of a mountain. Heaven's suppressing seal. He actually gathered the divine power of heaven and earth in a radius of 30,000 miles and combined it with his own divine power to form an incomparably huge, suppressing word. This was an ancient divine art. It was mysterious and powerful with infinite power. As the emissary of the divine ruins pushed out his palms, the ancient seal word flashing with golden light fell from the sky toward Ji Tianqing. Suddenly, with Ji Tianqing as the center, the space within 300 miles was sealed, as if it had been frozen. The sky above his head also shattered and collapsed into a pitch-black void. Ji Tianqing endured an unparalleled pressure as if the sky had collapsed and pressed down on him. However, he didn't panic in the face of danger. He formed a divine art with his left hand and punched the seal word in the sky with his right hand. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. Endless dazzling golden light condensed into a giant shadow of a dragon elephant. It let out a resounding roar and crashed into the suppressing word. Boom! There was an earth-shattering explosion that shook the clouds. In an instant, the sacred shadow of a dragon elephant turned into dazzling light and dissipated. The ancient and majestic golden seal characters were also blasted into smithereens and disintegrated. A violent and terrifying shock wave hit the two divine bodies. Ji Tianqing stood proudly in the sky without moving at all. Only his white robe fluttered in the wind. The emissary of the divine ruins trembled and was forced to take 2 steps back before he could steady himself. Such a comparison made it obvious who was superior. Ji Tianqing was actually half a level higher than him. The emissary of the divine ruins was even more shocked. He was about to use all his power and use his ultimate divine power. But at this moment, in the sky thousands of miles away, a clear and cold shout suddenly rang out. Chapter 2460. Ji Tianqing's eyes turned cold when he heard the word stop. He turned his head and looked towards the south. It was because he was extremely familiar with that cold woman's voice. The messenger of the divine ruins stopped casting and retracted his surging divine power. He turned around and looked at the person who had come. Swoosh! An icy blue stream of light flashed over from 1,000 miles away. In the blink of an eye, the icy blue stream of light arrived above the ancient viewing platform and stopped between Ji Tianqing and the messenger of the divine ruins. After the brilliance faded, a graceful and cold figure of absolute beauty appeared. It was a woman in a blue dress with a beautiful face, a cold temperament, and a dignified aura. She was like a goddess from the 9 heavens who had descended to the mortal world. She was so holy that it made people feel ashamed of their inferiority. Without a doubt, she was Luo Shui. Seeing Luo Shui appear, Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief, and a gratified smile appeared in his eyes. Yun Yao, who was not far away, also hurriedly flew over and stood beside Ji Tianqing. She looked at Luo Shui with concern. Seeing that Luo Shui was safe and sound, she revealed a relieved smile. At this moment, Luo Shui bowed to the messenger of the divine ruins and said calmly, "Senior, Tianqing came to find me. He did not mean to offend you. Please forgive him." The messenger of the divine ruins glanced at Ji Tianqing and nodded slightly. "I see." Ji Tianqing gave him an apologetic smile and cupped his fists. "Senior, I offended you just now. Please forgive me." The messenger of the divine ruins did not have much of a reaction. He only said in a low voice, "You are very good." After saying that, he turned and left, his figure disappearing into the sky. After the messenger of the divine ruins left, only Luo Shui, Ji Tianqing, and Yun Yao were left on the ancient viewing platform. The atmosphere immediately eased. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were also filled with excitement and anticipation. The two of them hurriedly came to Luo Shui and greeted her. "Luo Shui, I've finally found you." "Divine Master, it's great that you're safe and sound." Facing their concerned and joyful gazes, Luo Shui nodded slightly and a smile appeared on her beautiful face. "I'm fine. Sorry for making you guys worry." She had always been a cold and aloof ice mountain goddess, but now this slight smile was like the warm sun in winter, dispelling all the coldness and causing one's heart to feel warm. Ji Tianqing was stunned as he looked at Luo Shui in disbelief. He kept having the feeling that after not seeing Luo Shui for a few months, something seemed to have changed. In the past, Luo Shui was a cold and holy ice goddess, but now it had become holy and dignified, gentle like water, and even more mysterious. Simply put, the current Luo Shui was even more perfect. This was a peerless goddess. Yun Yao was also in disbelief. She looked at Luo Shui in shock and thought to herself, "What's wrong with the God Master? Could it be that the blow of the divine nation's destruction caused her to transform and make a breakthrough?" Seeing that the two of them were in a daze, Luo Shui took the initiative to say, "I came late. Otherwise, Tianqing wouldn't have fought with the old man of the divine ruins. Fortunately, this misunderstanding has been resolved and it didn't lead to a big mistake." Ji Tianqing nodded and asked, "Luo Shui, you disappeared for a few months without any news. We were all very worried about you. Now that you have returned and your injuries have healed, we have to work together to take revenge on the Heaven Punisher race." At the mention of this matter, Luo Shui's smile disappeared, and her eyes became cold and determined. She nodded in agreement and said in a low voice, "That's right. The Heaven Punisher race will be destroyed sooner or later, and the dragon-subduing general must die. Only then can we be worthy of the 1 billion innocent people of the divine nation who died tragically. However, the most important thing now is Yun Yao. She has to break through to the divine realm as soon as possible." As she spoke, she stretched out her left hand from her sleeve and handed it to Yun Yao. In her palm, there was a divine pearl the size of a walnut that was shining with a dense holy white light. As the white light flickered, it emitted a sacred and vast energy fluctuation, causing Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao to be shocked. Yun Yao, in particular, stared at the divine pearl without blinking. Her eyes were filled with admiration. "This is the divine pearl of light?" Luo Shui nodded slightly and explained, "That's right. This is the divine pearl I found in the divine tomb. It contains the sacred power of light. Yun Yao, I will now give this divine pearl to you. Refine it as soon as possible and try to break through to the martial god realm." As she spoke, she handed the divine pearl of light to Yun Yao. Yun Yao held the divine pearl of light with both hands as if she had received a precious treasure. She bowed solemnly and said, "Thank you, divine master. Yun Yao will refine it as soon as possible and live up to your expectations." Luo Shui pointed to the south and said, "At the foot of the mountain 3,000 miles away, I have dug a cave and set up layers of formations to use as a place for seclusion. Yun Yao, I have already prepared what you need for your seclusion. You can go and refine the divine pearl now." "Divine Lord, you are so considerate. Yun Yao can't thank you enough." Yun Yao's eyes were filled with gratitude as she bowed sincerely. Ji Tianxing was stunned and asked subconsciously, "Refine the divine pearl here? Why are you in such a hurry?" Originally, he had planned to take Yun Yao back to the Jiutian Tenju Tower after obtaining the divine pearl. Not only was it safe to cultivate in seclusion in the divine tower, but it also saved time. However, he did not expect Luo Shui to make such an arrangement. Luo Shui turned to look at him when she heard his question. Her eyes were as gentle as water, and she explained in a gentle tone, "Tianxing, that divine pearl is a little special. There is a divine formation in the divine tomb that can preserve divine power and not dissipate after tens of thousands of years. However, once you leave the divine tomb, your divine power will quickly dissipate, so you cannot delay. Moreover, I have been in seclusion in that cave to heal my injuries. It is very safe. Now that my injuries have healed, it is very appropriate for me to give it to Yun Yao. What do you think?" Ji Tianxing thought for a moment and could not refute, so he nodded and said, "Well, that's good too. You have considered it thoroughly." Seeing that he had dispelled his doubts, Luo Shui took him and Yun Yao to the south. Swoosh! 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 The three of them flew across the sky as fast as lightning. Soon, they flew 3,000 miles and landed on the peak of a 10,000-foot tall mountain. The cave that Luo Shui had dug was deep underground at the foot of the mountain. After she opened the sealing divine formation of the cave, Yun Yao brought the divine light pearl into the cave and began to refine the divine pearl without any distractions. Luo Shui closed the sealing divine formation and returned to the peak of the mountain with Ji Tianxing. The two of them stood side by side on the huge millstone at the peak of the mountain, waiting quietly. The night had finally dissipated and the light had arrived. A new day had begun. The divine ruins, which had always been dark and cloudy, could actually see a glimmer of light in the east. Ji Tianxing quietly looked at the horizon. His mood calmed down, and he was silent as if he was deep in thought. Luo Shui stood beside him and looked at him with a gentle gaze. The corners of her mouth curled into a faint smile as she asked, "Tianxing, what are you thinking about?" Ji Tianxing stared at the sky and said without hesitation, "I am thinking that the suffering and darkness have passed, and the light is coming." Chapter 2461. When Luo Shui said this, her tone was sincere and heartfelt. In fact, there was even a smile in her clear and lively eyes, filled with anticipation. Ji Tianxing vaguely felt that her words seemed to have a deeper meaning. However, he did not ask further, wondering if he was being too sensitive. The two of them stood side by side, facing the somewhat cold morning breeze and bathing in a trace of golden dawn. After a long silence, Luo Shui took the initiative to say, Tianxing, Yun Yao's closed-door cultivation to refine the divine pearl is not something that can be done overnight. At least half a month, at most 2 to 3 months. Let's wait somewhere else? Ji Tianxing shook his head and said, there's no need. Let's wait here. Luo Shui stopped persuading him and looked at him with a complicated expression. She whispered softly, Tianxing, you treat Yun Yao so well. Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and turned to look at her. He asked, Luo Shui, what's wrong? Why did you suddenly think of saying this? Luo Shui lowered her head without a trace and avoided his gaze, not daring to look him in the eye. The corners of her mouth curled up into a smile, and she said indifferently, It's nothing. It's just that all these years, seeing you wholeheartedly protect Yun Yao, that's all. Ji Tianxing nodded to express his understanding and explained with a smile, She is my wife and treats me as important as her own life. She even gave birth to children for me, she treats me like this, so no matter how well I treat her, it's only right. In fact, there were many reasons and reasons other than these. However, there were some things that he would keep in his heart. It was enough that he understood and did not have to say them out loud. For example, when he was young, he was betrayed and his dantian was destroyed. He carried the title of trash and was even discussed and mocked by everyone. During the darkest period of his life, it was Yun Yao who encouraged and helped him out of his predicament and entered a martial arts sect to cultivate. Later on, the two of them experienced all kinds of hardships and dangers and were together through thick and thin, never leaving each other. And all of this, he firmly remembered in his heart and would never forget it. Of course, other than Yun Yao, there was also Ji Ku. She had also accompanied him through all the hardships and became the most important person in his life. Luo Shui nodded slightly. After hesitating for a moment, he asked, Tianxing, other than Yun Yao, will you treat anyone else so well? This time, Ji Tianxing did not answer her question. He turned to face Luo Shui, looking at her with a solemn expression, and asked in a low voice, The Luo Shui I know has always been pure of heart and few desires, indifferent to fame and fortune, unaffected by the 7 emotions and 6 desires. She is like a fairy who does not eat the food of mortals, and would not care about such trivial matters. Why? It's only been a few months, but I feel like you've changed? Luo Shui raised her head slightly and looked at him with clear eyes. Her gentle smile did not change. After Ji Tianxing finished speaking, she pursed her lips and thought for a moment. Then, she smiled bitterly and said, Perhaps it's because in the past 3,000 years, Scandinavia has always been peaceful and stable. But this time, the Scandinavia that I created has been destroyed. Isn't this too big of a blow to me? In these few months, I would often be alone in a daze, and my thoughts would run wild many times. Ji Tianxing listened seriously. After a moment of silence, he comforted her, I can understand how you feel, but don't think too much. The calamity is only temporary. Soon, we will be able to defeat the Heaven Punisher race, kill General Long Fu, take back the territory that belongs to you, and rebuild Luo Shui Scandinavia. Luo Shui shook her head gently and said with a bitter tone, No, actually, you can't understand how I feel. Ji Tianxing stretched out his hands and pressed on her shoulders. He looked at her with a determined gaze and said, Of course I can understand, because my experience is 100 times heavier than yours. I fell from the peak of the divine Tao, fell at the most glorious moment, and became a nameless mortal. Such a blow and pain is far more than what you're experiencing now. Therefore, the me in this life is no longer the same as before. It's as if I'm a completely different person. Hearing his heartfelt words, Luo Shui's body shook. She slowly raised her head and looked into his eyes. She shook her head and said in a low voice, No, you haven't changed. You're still the same as before. Ji Tianxing frowned slightly and continued to comfort her. All right, even if my appearance and appearance haven't changed, my nature and thinking have changed. This is a different me. Therefore, I can understand how you feel, and I also know that you didn't mean to become so emotional. Don't feel pressured anymore. All of this will be over very soon. Amen. Luo Shui nodded and instinctively wanted to lean into his embrace. However, she was startled for a moment before she realized that the time was not right. She returned to her calm and cold state. Ji Tianxing saw that she had calmed down and was relieved. Luo Shui, don't think too much. Let's just wait here for Yao Yao to come out. After saying that, Ji Tianxing sat cross-legged on the large millstone and closed his eyes to rest. Luo Shui still stood beside him and looked at him with a complicated gaze. She thought to herself, Tianxing, if I had to choose, I would also be more willing to choose you in this life. After all, you're no longer as cold and unromantic as you were in the past. 1,000 years ago, you were born for the divine Tao. You were like a high and mighty, cold god. But in this life, you're flesh and blood, affectionate and righteous. You're the one who's worth entrusting your body to. Have I become sentimental? Perhaps I have. After all, I'm about to fulfill my wish and replace Yun Yao as your wife. I'll always be by your side. I'll do it flawlessly and won't reveal any flaws. I won't let you find any clues. I won't hurt you. I'll only use the rest of my life to love you. As these thoughts flashed through her mind, Luo Shui looked at Ji Tianxing with eyes full of affection. It was somewhat blurred. A faint smile hung on her lips as she immersed herself in her beautiful fantasy. Tianxing, there's a secret that I can't tell you for the time being. My divine soul has already changed and fused with an ancient memory. Do you know that I've already inherited the memories of Goddess Yaoguang? Now I'm already half a Goddess Yaoguang. After Yun Yao breaks through to the God stage, I'll occupy her divine body and become the complete Goddess Yaoguang. At that time, not only will I be the reincarnation of an ancient goddess, but I'll also be Luo Shui and your wife, Yun Yao. I'll make up for all the regrets of my previous life in this life. If the two of us work together, we'll definitely be invincible. This world and this era will belong to us. Thinking of this, Luo Shui's mood also fluctuated. Her eyes were filled with joy and anticipation. This was her plan. She had been preparing for it for a long time. Fortunately, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao didn't notice any clues. Everything was normal and developing in the direction she had predicted. What she had to do now was wait. Chapter 2462. Time passed quietly. Unknowingly, 25 days had passed. Yun Yao had been in the secret underground chamber, refining the divine pearl with all her might. It could be said that she was completely focused. Ji Tianxing and Luo Shui had also been guarding the mountain peak, waiting quietly. During this period, nothing unusual happened. The two of them did not receive any news from the outside world, and the emissary of the divine ruins did not appear. Everything was going smoothly, until the morning of the 26th day. When the sun rose, a wisp of dawn appeared in the eastern horizon, shining through the gray clouds and illuminating the mountain peak. Suddenly, a 5-colored ray of light shot into the sky from the cave deep underground. Swoosh! The ray of light covered the sky and the sun, covering thousands of miles of heaven and earth, making this area extremely dazzling. An extremely dense divine power was emitted from the ray of light, enveloping an area of 3,000 miles. A vast and majestic divine aura also filled the world. As a result, the wind and clouds in the sky changed color, and the boundless gray clouds dissipated. The rising sun in the east sprinkled down millions of bright golden light, illuminating the heaven and earth. 7 dazzling stars had appeared in the sky. They were arranged in a special pattern and were shining brightly. Such a divine and glorious scene was breathtaking. Ji Tianxing, who was in the middle of meditating, was suddenly awakened by the sudden divine light. He immediately ended his cultivation and opened his eyes. Seeing the phenomenon in the sky clearly and feeling the divine aura coming from underground, his eyes were filled with joy. It's Yao Yao. It must be her. This is the phenomenon of heaven and earth that only appears when a martial artist breaks through to the divine realm. Yao Yao has been cultivating in seclusion for 26 days, and finally refined the divine pearl and broke through to the martial god realm. Ji Tianqing secretly clenched his fists, his spirits lifted, and his eyes flickered with excitement. Luo Shui also woke up and glanced at him with a complicated expression. Soon after, he revealed a pleasantly surprised and gratified expression and praised, "Yun Yao is indeed worthy of being called a genius. She actually used only 26 days to refine the divine pearl and successfully break through to the martial god realm." Tianqing, look, the phenomenon of heaven and earth caused by her breaking through to the divine realm is actually the Big Dipper. Among the stars in the sky, the Big Dipper is the head of the heavenly dipper and earthly fiends. It is an incomparably noble phenomenon. From this, it can be seen that Yun Yao's future achievements are limitless. She will definitely inherit Goddess Yaoguang's legacy, and her body will undergo a huge transformation like a goddess reborn. Luo Shui deliberately pointed out these words to remind Ji Tianqing to be mentally prepared in advance. Even if Yun Yao's temperament changed in the future, it was reasonable. After all, Yaoguang's reincarnated. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "That's right. Yaoguang's. Now that he has broken through to the martial god realm, he might be able to comprehend the Yaoguang goddess's succession." Hearing this, Luo Shui felt more at ease. She raised her head to look at the divine clouds in the sky with a smile on her face. She said calmly, "Yun Yao has merged with 6 divine pearls and finally broken through to the deity realm. My wish has been achieved. From now on, we will work together to overcome all difficulties and restore peace and tranquility to the Shenwu continent." Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement. Although Yao Yao has just broken through to the martial god realm, she has inherited Goddess Yaoguang's divine Tao. Her combat power is outstanding. With our current strength, we are qualified to fight General Fu Long. After saying that, he instructed Luo Shui, who was beside him. "Luo Shui, you wait here. I will go and check on Yao Yao's situation now." Before he could get up and leave, Luo Shui hurriedly dissuaded him. "No. Yun Yao has just broken through to the martial god realm, and her divine Tao foundation is not stable. She should be in seclusion to strengthen her foundation. If you go and see her now, you will definitely affect her cultivation." Ji Tianqing could only suppress his excitement and anticipation when he heard Luo Shui's advice. He nodded. "Fine, let's wait a little longer." Thus, the two suppressed their excitement and continued to wait at the mountain peak. Unknowingly, another 4 hours passed. It was noon. The 5-colored light that covered the sky had yet to dissipate. Not a single gray cloud could be seen in the sky for thousands of kilometers, and the resplendent sunlight became even more dazzling. At this moment, Ji Tianqing suddenly had a bad premonition, and a chill ran down his spine. Before he could react, 2 sword lights that were thousands of meters long suddenly appeared in the sky behind him and attacked him as fast as lightning. They were 2 dazzling sword lights that contained an unparalleled sharpness that could tear through space. They pierced toward him and Luo Shui respectively. Luo Shui finally realized that the situation was not good. She wanted to turn around and block, but it was too late. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing decisively stepped forward and swung his palms at the 2 giant swords. Heaven-shaking palm. Following his angry roar, boundless golden light spewed out from his palms and formed 2 palm shadows that were as large as mountains. Kaboom! Amidst a deafening explosion, the golden palm shadows and the 2 giant swords collided fiercely, and a destructive shockwave erupted. The golden palm shadows shattered on the spot, but the 2 dazzling sword lights did not collapse. They stabbed Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui. Boom! Boom! Following 2 muffled explosions, Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui were both sent flying. Ji Tianqing's divine body was special and had a powerful defense, so he was not injured. However, Luo Shui's protective divine light was destroyed by the sword lights, and her face turned pale as she spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing hurriedly cast a concerned gaze at her and asked via voice transmission, "Luo Shui, how are your injuries?" Luo Shui replied anxiously, "Don't worry about me. Quickly stop the attacker. Don't let her destroy Yun Yao's cultivation." Ji Tianqing was relieved to see that her life was not in danger. He released his divine sense to cover the surroundings and immediately discovered the attacker. She was hiding in the sky 100 miles ahead. Therefore, he did not hesitate to draw the burial of heaven and rush toward the attacker. At the same time, he did not forget to send a voice transmission to Luo Shui. "Luo Shui, I will deal with the attacker. You must protect Yun Yao." The situation was critical and urgent, and Luo Shui did not have time to think. She nodded without hesitation and said, "Okay. Don't worry, I will not let Yun Yao be hurt at all. You have to be careful too. Don't try to be brave." Ji Tianqing only responded and did not say anything. His figure flashed and rushed 100 miles away. His divine sense detected that the attacker lurking in the dark was a woman with a head full of white hair and wearing a long white dress. The white-haired woman was obviously not young, and her strength was unfathomable. She was staring at him coldly and waving her palm to send out an overwhelming number of light blades. Ji Tianqing waved his sword to block as he frowned and looked at her. He thought to himself, "Who is this white-haired woman?" Chapter 2463. Bang, 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 bang. A series of muffled sounds reverberated in the sky. Hundreds of golden sword lights and blazing white blades shattered into billions of fragments that scattered across the land. Ji Tianqing had used all his strength to exchange a single blow with the white-haired woman, but he had not been able to gain the upper hand. Both sides were evenly matched, and the white-haired woman had not used any divine weapons, so she had a slight advantage. Seeing that Ji Tianqing had neutralized her divine art attack, the white-haired woman was clearly startled. She then turned around and flew into the distance without hesitation. Ji Tianqing did not expect that the white-haired woman would be so decisive. He hesitated for a moment, but then he raised his divine sword and chased after her. Trying to escape? No way. With a cold shout, he strode across the sky and chased after her, covering 50 kilometers with each step. The white-haired woman's demeanor was very light and graceful. She was like a streak of white light flashing across the sky, covering hundreds of kilometers in the blink of an eye. Even though Ji Tianqing chased after her with all his might, it was very difficult for him to catch up in a short amount of time. Both parties chased after each other for about 100 breaths of time, but they were still 150 kilometers apart. Ji Tianqing was able to determine that the white-haired woman's strength was definitely above his own. In fact, it was very likely that she had reached the 6th or 7th level of the martial god realm. As he chased after the white-haired woman, he muttered in his heart and secretly speculated, "A 6th or 7th stage martial god is stronger than the 3 divine masters. On the Shenwu continent, which martial god is stronger than the 3 divine masters? Moreover, she's a human martial god." Ji Tianqing racked his brains, but he could not figure out the white-haired woman's identity, nor could he understand her intentions. Finally, 7 or 8 minutes passed. Both parties chased each other for more than 20,000 kilometers before arriving in the sky above a barren mountain range. The white-haired woman seemed to be lacking in strength, and her speed gradually decreased. Ji Tianqing took advantage of this opportunity to chase after her without hesitation. Whoosh! His figure flashed, and he teleported in front of the white-haired woman, blocking her path. The white-haired woman was forced to stop, and she stood in the sky with a calm expression as she looked coldly at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing also stared at her, sizing her up from head to toe before asking, "Who are you, and why did you attack me?" The white-haired woman replied expressionlessly, "Who am I? Ha ha! Is this question important?" Someone is willing to pay a sky-high price for your and Luo Shui's lives. This old one is just following the rules. Hearing this answer, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned and asked doubtfully, "Someone offered a sky-high price for Luo Shui's and my lives? Are you an assassin?" "No. You're already a veteran martial god expert. How could you possibly become an assassin? Who in the Xinwu continent is qualified to hire you as an assassin? You're lying." The white-haired woman was stunned for a moment, as if she had not expected Ji Tianxing to have such a reaction. She frowned but didn't reveal any abnormalities. She sneered and said, "Hee, so what if I'm an assassin? The price the other party is offering is exactly what I need the most. Killing you and Luo Shui would be an easy matter, so why not? Kid, cut the crap. This old one will take your life right now." As her voice fell, the white-haired woman waved her wide sleeves and raised her palms to slap Ji Tianxing. Swish, swish, swish. Ji Tianxing didn't dare to slack off. He hurriedly waved the Burial of Heaven and used his ultimate sword technique to launch a counterattack. 7-star sword. The Burial of Heaven stabbed forward, and 49 starry sword lights shot out, piercing toward the 5-colored divine light with endless divine power. Boom, boom, boom. The giant sword and the divine light collided, and a deafening explosion echoed in the sky. The sword lights and the divine light collapsed at the same time, turning into a 5-colored shockwave that spread out in all directions, covering a radius of 2,000 miles. The violent force instantly razed 2,000 miles of mountains and rivers to the ground. Ji Tianxing and the white-haired woman were both forced to retreat more than 100 miles, panting violently. Neither side gained the upper hand. The white-haired woman shouted coldly with a gloomy face and swung her palm again. Ji Tianxing didn't hesitate either. His left hand formed a sword technique, and his right hand held the Burial of Heaven as he charged forward. The two sides fought high in the sky, using their ultimate techniques with all their might. The sky fell and the earth cracked, and the sun and moon lost their light. A loud rumbling sound reverberated in the sky. The violent shockwave spread in all directions, dispersing the gray clouds in the sky and flattening the mountains on the ground. The two figures flickered high in the sky, changing positions from time to time, constantly changing the battlefield. However, neither side could do anything to the other in the short term. At the same time, Luo Shui, who was injured by the white-haired woman, had already recovered. She was supposed to stay on the mountain peak, guarding Yun Yao in the underground cave. However, she looked to the east with a complicated gaze and muttered to herself, "Master, with your strength and means, it shouldn't be a problem for you to stall Tianxing for an hour. I just hope you don't forget to not hurt Tianxing." After muttering to herself, she suppressed the complicated thoughts in her heart and walked down the mountain peak. Swoosh! She landed at the foot of the mountain and entered the ground in a flash. After traveling for 50 miles underground, she finally arrived at the entrance of a cave in the depths of the earth. There were 2 layers of sealing divine formations in front of her. These were the divine formations that she had set up personally, so she was very familiar with them. She waved her palm and released a few beams of divine light to activate the divine formations. When the divine formations cracked open a door that was more than 10 feet tall, she stepped through the divine formations and entered the cave. In the spacious cave, the light was dim and it was silent. Only the gems embedded in the cave walls shone with a faint white light. Luo Shui walked expressionlessly, crossed a long tunnel, and came to the middle of the cave. 100 steps in front of her, there was a high platform made of jade. More than 10 types of mysterious divine formations were set up on it. At the top of the high platform sat a beautiful woman in a white dress. She was pure and holy. She was Yun Yao. Yun Yao had just broken through to the immortal state. Her entire body was surrounded by 5-colored divine light. She was focused on cultivating. Just as Ji Tianxing and Luo Shui had guessed, after breaking through to the immortal state, she had indeed undergone an obvious transformation. Not only had her temperament become colder and more noble, but her aura had also become more powerful and holy. She was like a goddess who had descended to the mortal world. Luo Shui stepped onto the high platform and stood in front of Yun Yao. She looked down at Yun Yao with a complicated gaze. She murmured in a low voice, "Yun Yao, your mission has been completed. It's time for you to rest." Yun Yao, who was cultivating, suddenly heard Luo Shui's voice and was immediately awakened. She quickly ended her cultivation and opened her eyes to look at Luo Shui. She said joyfully, "Divine Master, why are you here? Yun Yao has not let you down. She has finally refined the divine pearl and broken through to the martial god realm." Obviously, the pure and kind Yun Yao did not expect danger to befall her. Luo Shui looked at her calmly and nodded. "You have done well. Now, I will open the divine formation to help you cultivate. I will teach you a few divine abilities and supreme techniques to help you stabilize your divine foundation as soon as possible." Chapter 2464. Yun Yao didn't doubt Luo Shui's words at all. Furthermore, she had always believed in Luo Shui and respected him very much. She even thanked Luo Shui gratefully when she heard that he was going to teach her a divine ability. "Thank you for your help, Divine Master. Yun Yao is very grateful." Then, she followed Luo Shui's instructions and slowly closed her eyes. She opened her heart and waited. Luo Shui looked at her deeply. After hesitating for a moment, he cast a spell to activate the divine array on the platform. Swoosh! 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 Suddenly, the dozens of divine arrays on the platform were activated and released hundreds of five-colored divine light. Those hundreds of five-colored divine lights were like densely packed ropes that extended to the top of the platform and trapped Yun Yao. In the blink of an eye, Yun Yao was bound by hundreds of divine lights, and her divine body and power were sealed. A majestic suppressive force descended and firmly suppressed her on the platform. She couldn't move at all. Only then did Yun Yao realize that something was wrong. She opened her eyes and looked at Luo Shui. Puzzled, she asked, "Divine Master, what are you doing?" She could clearly feel that she was sealed by dozens of divine arrays and had become a puppet that could be slaughtered at any time. This didn't seem like a divine array that assisted in cultivation, and it didn't seem like a divine ability that was going to be taught. Even so, she didn't think of the worst. She only felt that it was strange. Luo Shui looked at her calmly. He no longer hid his thoughts and revealed his true colors. "Yao Yao, ask yourself honestly, how have I treated you all these years?" Yun Yao was stunned and nodded subconsciously. "Divine Master, you treat me like your own child. Naturally, you care for me and dote on me. However, Divine Master, why are you suddenly asking this?" Luo Shui nodded slightly and smiled. "I also know that you have always been loyal to me. Now, you have seen that I have lost the Luo Shui God Nation. I have nothing left. If I want to take revenge and take back everything that belongs to me, are you willing to sacrifice yourself for me?" Yun Yao felt even more strange. Seeing that Luo Shui's condition was a little strange, she couldn't help but frown. "Divine Master, what's wrong? Did something happen to him? Can you remove the seal first? Where's Tianxing? Where is he?" Luo Shui ignored her question and continued, "I believe you already knew that when you were born, you were a dead baby. You were already dead 30 years ago. It was I who sent the patriarch to find you and implant the Neptunian divine pearl into your body, which saved your life. Therefore, I am your second parent, giving you this happy life." Yun Yao looked at her with sparkling eyes and said in a serious tone, "Yun Yao understands what the Divine Lord said. That's why Yun Yao respects you so much. Moreover, Yun Yao has been working hard on her cultivation to break through to the divine realm as soon as possible so that she can help you take revenge and take back the kingdom of God. No matter how hard it was, how many storms and dangers she had to go through, Yun Yao would never back down. However, I would like to know, why did you suddenly say all these things today?" Luo Shui smiled and said in a low voice, "It's very simple. I helped you defy the heavens and change your fate, allowing you to live for 30 more years and enjoy family and love. If you can become his wife and bear his child, your life will be complete. Next, you should return to your original fate and disappear quietly." Yun Yao's pupils constricted when she heard that. Disbelief filled her face. She looked at Luo Shui in disbelief. After a long silence, she asked in a low voice, You want to kill me?" Luo Shui shook her head gently and explained, "No, I don't want to kill you. I just want to take back what belongs to me." "What belongs to you?" Yun Yao frowned and shook her head gently. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this? I respect you very much. Tianqing sees you as a close friend. I've already broken through to the divine realm. Soon we can fight side by side, destroy the heaven-punishing race, and take back the Luo Shui kingdom of God. We're about to take revenge. Why have you become so unfamiliar?" "Unfamiliar?" Luo Shui raised her eyebrows and smiled gently. "No, it's not that I've become unfamiliar. It's just that you've never understood me. Ha ha. I don't have much time, so I won't talk nonsense with you. Before Tianqing returns, I have to complete the plan and completely replace you." As she spoke, Luo Shui slowly raised her palms and began to cast a spell. A white divine soul light enveloped Yun Yao. Yun Yao's eyes turned cold. She asked in disbelief, "Before Tianqing returns? Completely replace me? Did you use some trick to send Tianqing away? You want to destroy my divine soul and take over my body?" Luo Shui nodded slightly, his expression calm as he said, "You are indeed worthy of being the person that I have chosen. You are truly talented and intelligent, with an intelligence that surpasses others. In such a short time, you could guess the truth with just a few words from me. That's right. Tianqing has already been lured away. He won't be back for an hour. I'll take over your body and replace you as Yun Yao. I'll be his wife and accompany him for the rest of his life." Luo Shui sat cross-legged in front of her. She smiled and said gently, "Don't worry, I won't hurt the 2 children in your womb. Because they'll be my children from now on. I won't hurt Tianqing either because he'll be my husband. I'll love him more than you. As the reincarnation of the goddess of Jade Light, I'll help him return to his peak and take revenge." At this point, Yun Yao completely understood Luo Shui's plan and intentions. Her body stiffened and her eyes widened as she stared at Luo Shui. Her eyes were filled with shock and despair. After a long time, she regained her senses and shook her head in disbelief. How can you be so despicable? You're the noble, holy, and kind martial god Luo Shui. How can you do such a despicable thing? I respected you so much and Tianqing treated you as his best friend. How can you treat us like this?" Luo Shui frowned and shook her head. "No, this isn't despicable. It's a plan I made 30 years ago. Originally, I saved your life to nurture you as a substitute. After you fused with a few divine pearls, you'd be able to form the divine body of the goddess of Jade Light. After I refined the memories of the goddess of Jade Light and took over your body, I'd be able to become the reincarnation of the goddess of Jade Light. But I didn't expect that you'd bring me such a huge surprise. The Sword God has actually been reborn and has become your husband. So, I could only take your place. Not only could I complete the plan, I could also fulfill the long-cherished wish of my previous life. You're my shadow. Regardless of appearance, figure, or temperament, they're all very similar. Tianqing loves you deeply and married you. This proves that he already loved me. But in his previous life, he was obsessed with the way of the sword and didn't understand romance. Chapter 2465. Luo Shui spoke in a calm tone. There was not a trace of anger or hatred in her voice. Her expression and eyes were very calm. These were all her heartfelt words. She had already thought it through and believed it was the truth. She did not think that this was a mistake, and she did not feel sorry for Yun Yao. But in Yun Yao's eyes, the current Luo Shui was so unfamiliar. She looked at Luo Shui with a burning gaze and shook her head gently. It's hard to believe that you would say these words yourself. I never thought that your true thoughts would be like this. No wonder you used to care and take care of me so much in the past. Sure enough, there is no love without a reason in this world. There is always a purpose and a conspiracy. Luo Shui nodded slightly and sighed faintly. All right, I've said what needs to be said. You also understand the reason. You can go with peace of mind. As her voice fell, she slowly stretched out her palms and released a dense white light of divine soul into Yun Yao's body. She wanted to refine Yun Yao's divine soul and seize all of Yun Yao's memories. In this way, after she took over Yun Yao's body, she would not reveal any flaws and would not let Ji Tianxing see any clues. Swoosh! Swoosh! 2 streaks of dense white light, like 2 tentacles, reached into Yun Yao's mind and swept towards her divine soul. In the next moment, Yun Yao's divine soul would be disintegrated. However, Yun Yao was sealed by a powerful divine array and could not move or resist at all. At this moment of imminent peril, something unexpected happened. 2 different divine soul powers suddenly flew out of Yun Yao's stomach and entered her mind, firmly wrapping around her divine soul. Moreover, 2 divine soul voices, one male and one female, were transmitted into Luo Shui's mind. You bad woman! Stop it! Don't hurt mother! The first to sound was a clear and pleasant girl's voice. Her tone was filled with anger and worry. Then, another boy's voice sounded. If you want to harm mother, then kill us first. Although this voice was very young, like a 3-year-old child, the tone was very firm and brave. Without a doubt, the 2 souls that had suddenly appeared were Yaya and Chunchen. The 2 of them were fearless and resolutely protected Yun Yao's soul. Such an unforeseen event caused Luo Shui to hurriedly withdraw his hand and frown fiercely. She stared at Yun Yao's abdomen with a face full of surprise. She couldn't help but exclaim, "Are those the voices of the 2 children's souls? They hadn't even been born yet, but their souls were already so powerful? How is this possible?" Although Luo Shui had long known that Yun Yao had been pregnant for many years, she had never given birth to 2 children. Those 2 children were so extraordinary. In the future, they would definitely be world-shaking, peerless geniuses. However, Luo Shui had never expected that the 2 children would already possess powerful souls and extraordinary strength while they were still in the womb. Furthermore, the 2 children had independent and complete thoughts, no different from normal people. This was too shocking. For a moment, Luo Shui's body stiffened as he stood there, hesitating and weighing his options. The 2 white lights of the souls that she had released also stopped in Yun Yao's mind. She didn't know whether to advance or retreat. At this moment, Yaya used the voice of the soul to say, "Mother, don't be afraid. Yaya and brother will protect you." Chunchen confronted Luo Shui and said in a calm and serious tone, "Martial God Luo Shui, father and mother both regard you as the most trusted person. I didn't expect you to do such a thing. If you insist on doing things your own way, then kill me and Yaya first. We will live and die together with mother. However, I must remind you that even if you have taken over mother's body, Yaya and I are already dead. Father will definitely find out. With father's intelligence and wisdom, he will quickly figure out your scheme and understand the truth. At that time, no matter how you quibble and cover up, it will be useless. Father will definitely break off relations with you and kill you to avenge the 3 of us." Chenchen's words were clear and orderly. Her tone was low and dignified, and it actually had some soul-shaking power. While Luo Shui was greatly surprised, her expression also became more and more unsightly. Her face became gloomy, and her brows furrowed tightly together. A hint of hesitation flashed in her eyes. She had to admit that what Chunchen said was very reasonable. Either she stopped and gave up, or she would be the villain to the end. However, things had already come to this point. She had already told Yun Yao her plan and conspiracy. How could she give up? If she insisted on doing things her own way and killed Chunchen and Yaya first, and then refined Yun Yao's soul, then she wouldn't be able to explain it to Ji Tianqing in the future. Therefore, Chunchen and Yaya absolutely couldn't be killed. Even if she used a secret technique to knock the two children unconscious and then took over Yun Yao's body, it was still impossible. After all, the two children already knew the truth. Once they told Ji Tianqing the truth, this matter would still be exposed. In any case, this matter wouldn't work no matter what. Luo Shui immediately fell into a dilemma. She stared at Yun Yao in a daze, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Her hands stopped in the air and trembled slightly. She was struggling fiercely in her heart. This was because after thinking about it, she realized that there was only one solution to this matter. It's already impossible to hide from the two children and replace Yun Yao as Tianqing's wife. If I kill the two children and take over Yun Yao's body, I won't be able to hide it from Tianqing, and it will soon be exposed. The only thing I can do now is to give up on Tianqing and sacrifice the two children and Yun Yao. That way, I will become the reincarnation of Goddess Yaoguang and become enemies with Tianqing. We will never be able to reconcile. When she thought of this, Luo Shui's heart ached faintly. Even her breathing became cold. However, she had no way out. She had no other choice. 30,000 miles away from the ancient viewing platform, in the shattered sky, Ji Tianqing and the white-haired woman were still fighting fiercely. However, after exchanging 2,000 blows, the outcome of the battle was about to be decided. Ji Tianqing was slightly better. He was only slightly injured. There were a few wounds on his chest and back. Golden divine blood soaked his white robe, and his long hair draped over his shoulders. On the other hand, the white-haired woman's injuries were obviously more serious. Not only was her entire body covered in wounds, but her dress was also stained with blood. There was also a fist-sized bloody hole on her waist. It was caused by the god-slaying flying dagger. The wound was difficult to heal. Moreover, she had been injured a few months ago and had yet to recover. She was also seriously injured by Ji Tianqing. Her strength had been greatly weakened, and her aura had become extremely chaotic. Ji Tianqing saw that she was about to lose, so he no longer delayed and used his ultimate move with all his might. Great rotating sacred sword. Following his low shout, the sky lit up with starlight that blotted out the sun. Tens of thousands of starry swords shot down like meteors, covering a radius of thousands of miles. The white-haired woman was under great pressure. Her expression was solemn, and a wry smile flashed across her eyes. Luo Shui, you told me not to hurt him before. But now it seems that you have underestimated this kid's strength. Chapter 2466. The white-haired woman smiled bitterly to herself. She had already tried her best, and could only stall for time until now. Facing the starry swords that blotted out the sky, she could only use her strongest life-saving trump card. Sea God's Shield. The white-haired woman shouted in a low voice. Her palms lit up with an icy blue brilliance, and a round shield the size of a millstone appeared. The shield was like an ice crystal. It was exquisite and translucent, and it flickered with a gorgeous icy blue light. The shield was round, but there were 9 sharp thorns and blades protruding from the edges of the shield. It exuded a terrifying chill. Obviously, this was a divine shield that could be used for both offense and defense. Under the white-haired woman's control, the millstone-sized sea god's shield instantly expanded 100 times and became as big as a mountain. Boom, 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 boom. Thousands of starry swords slammed into the sea god's shield with the power to destroy everything. A series of loud bangs erupted. The loud bangs shook the sky and spread thousands of miles away. The sky was blasted into smithereens, becoming riddled with holes, revealing a vast expanse of pitch-black void. The sea god's shield was also trembling. It flickered with an icy blue brilliance, and cracks appeared on it. Fortunately, the divine shield did not shatter. The white-haired woman tried her best to control the divine shield and blocked all the sword lights. Most of the tens of thousands of starry swords collapsed, bursting into starlight fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. However, those starry fragments condensed into even more light swords and stabbed at the white-haired woman. Instantly, the white-haired woman was trapped in the sky full of sword lights and could not escape. While she was shocked, her expression became more and more serious. She did not counterattack and finally decided to retreat. Bam! 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 As countless sword lights slammed into the sea god's shield, the white-haired woman quickly retreated under the protection of the divine shield. Seeing that she was about to escape, Ji Tianqing quickly chased after her with his sword. Swish! 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 He swung his sword and slashed 7 dazzling golden sword lights at the white-haired woman, but they were all blocked by the sea god's shield. The divine shield was flashing with cold light and trembling non-stop, but it was still intact and sturdy. 10 breaths later, the white-haired woman retreated out of the range of the sword lights. She used her teleportation technique and broke through the sky to escape. Shwa! Her figure flashed and disappeared into the void crack. She passed through several layers of alternate spaces and fled thousands of miles away. Ji Tianqing chased after her, but he lost track of the white-haired woman's aura. He could only stop in front of the spatial rift. This battle that could be called a battle of the pinnacle was finally over. The sword light fragments that filled the sky fell down like heavy snow, and the raging storm gradually subsided. Ji Tianqing secretly adjusted his divine power and calmed himself down. He suddenly thought of Yun Yao and Luo Shui. He frowned and muttered to himself, "This is bad. I chased after the white-haired woman for so long, yet Luo Shui did not follow me, nor did he send me a message. Could it be that the white-haired woman was trying to lure me away? She had accomplices who were currently dealing with Luo Shui and Yao Yao? Could her accomplice be General Dragon Fu?" Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing's heart suddenly burned with worry. He quickly turned around and rushed back. Swish! He used his teleportation divine ability, and his body lit up with white light. His figure flashed and crossed 1,000 miles. Next, he streaked across the sky like a stream of light and rushed back at his fastest speed. In a short 15 minutes, he had flown more than 15,000 miles and returned to the vicinity of the mountain peak where Yun Yao was in seclusion. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing landed on the mountain peak and looked around with his sharp eyes. He also released his divine sense to investigate the situation. Luckily, everything around the mountain peak is normal. There are no signs of fighting. This means that Luo Shui was not attacked by any expert. But I clearly asked Luo Shui to guard this place. How did she disappear? Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he felt a little puzzled. Could it be that Luo Shui was also lured away by someone's plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain? If that's the case, then wouldn't Yao Yao be in danger? With this sudden thought, he could not be bothered to look for Luo Shui. He quickly landed at the foot of the mountain and cast a spell to escape underground. Swoosh! He drilled into the soil and flew underground without any obstruction. Soon, he arrived outside the cave. The cave that Luo Shui had dug was sealed by 2 layers of divine arrays. Ji Tianqing used his divine sense to scan and found that the divine arrays were intact and operating normally. This made him feel much more at ease, and his anxious mood also eased. However, after some consideration, he still decided to enter the cave and see Yun Yao's situation with his own eyes. He used his God's Eye technique and stared at the 2 layers of sealing divine arrays, carefully observing them. After a while, he saw some clues and found a way to break it. Ha ha! Luo Shui actually still remembers this lesser double moon formation. Back then, I only casually mentioned it once to give her some advice. I didn't expect her to remember it in her heart and integrate it into the yin-yang heaven suppression formation. Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a smile. He muttered a few words and began to break the formation. Swish, swish, swish. He waved his hand and shot out rays of dazzling golden divine light into the ceiling divine arrays, breaking the divine arrays as if they were silk from a cocoon. In a short 15 minutes, he had broken the 2 divine arrays. Swoosh! The divine arrays flashed with 5-colored light, and a door that was more than 10 feet tall appeared. Ji Tianqing stepped through the light door and entered the array. He quickly passed through a dark tunnel and arrived at a spacious cave. This cave had a radius of 1,000 feet, and there were traces of human excavation everywhere. There were more than 10 gemstones embedded in the walls, and the light was a little dim. Ji Tianqing looked around the cave, and his gaze fell on the middle of the cave. There was a high platform made of jade, and it was shining with 5-colored divine light, exuding a vast and mighty divine power. When he saw the situation on the high platform, his body stiffened, and his expression changed. There were 2 women on the high platform. One of them was a woman in a white dress, and she was sitting cross-legged on the high platform. She was Yun Yao. Opposite Yun Yao sat a woman in an icy blue dress. She was Luo Shui. Hundreds of divine lights extended from the high platform and bound Yun Yao like ropes. They released an extremely powerful divine power and firmly suppressed Yun Yao. She couldn't move, and she looked at Luo Shui with a complicated expression. She shook her head and tried to persuade Luo Shui, and tears welled up in her eyes. Luo Shui closed her eyes and turned a deaf ear to her words. Pure white divine light surged from her palms, and she was using some kind of divine power. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment, and his brows furrowed tightly. He never would have thought that such a thing would happen in just an hour after he left. He couldn't believe his eyes, and he couldn't help but shout, "Luo Shui, what are you doing?" A cold shout that sounded like muffled thunder broke the silence and reverberated in the cave. Ji Tianqing's tone was a little angry, disappointed, and worried. Yun Yao, whose eyes were filled with tears, was relieved when she heard his voice. She hurriedly shouted, "Tianqing, quick, stop her. The Divine Master has gone crazy." Chapter 2467. Yun Yao was suppressed by more than 10 divine arrays. She was unable to move or use her strength. In such a situation, she said those words with tears in her eyes and an anxious tone. Ji Tianqing saw this and felt a strong sense of anger and worry. At the same time, the doubts that he had suppressed in his heart completely erupted. He suddenly remembered what the ancestor Fiend Celestial had said to Yun Yao back then. Which of those who became gods didn't step on mountains of corpses and seas of blood? How can there be good people? Luo Shui is using you as a cauldron to revive Yaoguang and then take over your body. Her final goal is to turn herself into Yaoguang. When the ancestor Fiend Celestial said those words, he and Yun Yao did not take it to heart. They only thought that the ancestor Fiend Celestial was deliberately slandering them. The 2 of them did not believe that Luo Shui would do such a despicable thing. But now Ji Tianqing saw with his own eyes that Yun Yao was suppressed and Luo Shui was casting her arts. No matter how unbelievable it was, he had to accept reality. Luo Shui, stop. Ji Tianqing was shocked and angry. He glared at Luo Shui and shouted angrily, "To think that Yao and I treated you like family and trusted you unconditionally. I didn't expect that you would actually do such a thing. Stop immediately. Otherwise we will break all ties. If you dare to hurt Yun Yao, I will not forgive you." However, Luo Shui turned a deaf ear to his words. She still had her back to him and even sped up her arts. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing became even more furious. He rushed over in a flash and slapped Luo Shui with his palm. Yun Yao saw Ji Tianqing attack and immediately shouted anxiously, "No! Tianqing, stop!" However, when she shouted these words, the dazzling golden divine light from Ji Tianqing's palm had already fiercely struck the Luo River. Bam! Luo Shui did not dodge and was hit squarely on the back by the divine light. She was sent flying and rolled on the high platform, landing behind Yun Yao. Just as she was about to stand up, she spat out a mouthful of blood and her face became as pale as paper. She stood up weakly and staggered forward. She looked at Ji Tianqing with dim eyes. Her blood-stained face revealed a bitter self-mocking smile. He, as expected of Kenshin. Even an expert like Master could only delay you for an hour. Luo Shui's voice was hoarse and calm. Master? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked with a frown, Is the white-haired woman who attacked me your master? That's right. Luo Shui did not hide anything and nodded. She is known as Fairy Yuqing and has been living in seclusion in the jade-clear sky of the Eastern Sea. Ji Tianqing came to a realization and said with a serious expression, In that case, you colluded with Fairy Yuqing and deliberately let her lure me away? And you took the opportunity to enter the cave, subdued Yun Yao, and wanted to possess her body? Luo Shui nodded and looked at him with hazy eyes. A smile appeared on her beautiful face. You are still as calm and wise as before. No matter what kind of conspiracy, it can't escape your eyes. At this moment, Yun Yao shook her head and said anxiously, No, Tianqing, it's not like that. The Divine Master wanted to possess me, but she... Without waiting for her to finish speaking, Luo Shui frowned. He waved his hands and shot out 2 rays of divine light, suppressing Yun Yao. Suddenly, Yun Yao's voice disappeared and she could not say another word. Even her head was frozen. She could no longer move or change her expression. Only her eyes remained clear, revealing an anxious expression. Seeing Luo Shui's reaction and how she was so weak that she could collapse at any time, Ji Tianqing frowned. He could tell that things were not as simple as they seemed on the surface. At this moment, Luo Shui staggered behind Yun Yao and raised her palms again. She released the white light of her divine soul and injected it into Yun Yao's mind. As the divine white light quickly dissipated, her expression became uglier and uglier. Her aura became weaker and weaker, like a candle in the wind. Ji Tianqing's pupils constricted. He finally saw through the clues and shouted angrily, Stop! Luo Shui, are you crazy? You actually stripped your own divine soul and merged it with Yun Yao's divine soul? What are you trying to do? He finally understood that Luo Shui was not possessing Yun Yao. Instead, she was merging her own divine soul with Yun Yao's divine soul. In this way, Yun Yao would be able to obtain her divine soul's memories and strength. As for herself, she would vanish like smoke into thin air, completely vanishing. Ji Tianqing could not figure out why Luo Shui would do this. The situation was critical. He did not have time to think about the reason and immediately wanted to stop Luo Shui. However, Luo Shui shouted in a low voice, Stop! Tianqing, don't act rashly. My divine soul and Yun Yao's are connected. If you forcefully stop me, I will die with her. Indeed, Luo Shui could detonate her and Yun Yao's divine souls with a single thought. Both of them would die. Ji Tianqing did not dare to act rashly. He could only stand below the high platform and look at the 2 of them anxiously. Luo Shui, why do you have to do this? Yun Yao has already broken through to the divine realm. We will soon be able to take revenge on the heaven-punishing clan. What you have lost, you will soon be able to take back. Why do you have to do this? He could not stop Luo Shui and could only persuade her. Luo Shui shook her head and sighed as she cast a spell to strip her divine soul. It's too late to say this now. Since 30 years ago, when I carried out that plan, the mistakes have already begun. I sent Gu Daoxian to investigate in the Tianxian continent and found Yun Yao, who died at birth. I used the Neptunian divine pearl to revive her. From then on, I gave Yun Yao a new life and nurtured her as a substitute. I am already a martial god. My divine path foundation and divine abilities have already been set. I cannot fuse with the divine pearl. Therefore, I need Yun Yao to fuse with the divine pearl and cultivate the body of the goddess of Yaoguang. A few months ago, I entered the cemetery of the gods and found a strand of divine soul memory in the tomb of the goddess of Yaoguang. I successfully refined it. I have the memories of the goddess of Yaoguang. After Yun Yao broke through to the divine realm, she has the body of the goddess of Yaoguang. As long as I possess Yun Yao, I can fuse with her and become the reincarnation of the goddess of Yaoguang. Furthermore, I can fulfill my wish of 1,000 years and become your wife. Before she dissipated, Luo Shui no longer hid the truth and told Ji Tianxing the truth. Only then did Ji Tianxing understand the cause and effect of everything. Many things that had puzzled him in the past suddenly became clear. Luo Shui revealed a gentle smile. Her eyes were blurred as she said, "Tianxing, in your previous life, you were obsessed with the way of the sword and didn't understand romance. You were also neither close nor distant to me. However, I don't hate you, nor do I blame you. In this life, I don't want to miss out on you again. I don't want to leave any regrets. Therefore, I really want to become Yun Yao and accompany you with another identity. Unfortunately, you have 2 children. The 2 most special and intelligent children in this world. I have already made a mistake. There is no turning back. I also don't have the face to face you. Since I can't possess Yun Yao and can't hurt the 2 children and you, I can only sacrifice myself." When Luo Shui said this, more than 90% of her soul had already dissipated. Her entire body ignited with blazing white flames. Her body was disintegrating, turning into strands of 5-colored spiritual energy that returned to the world. She smiled and said with a serene expression, "Tianxing, I'm sorry. Please forgive me for my selfishness. From now on, my soul's memories will fuse with Yun Yao's soul. I will be a part of her. Although there is no more Luo Shui in this world, I can accompany you forever by existing in this way. We will be together forever." Her voice echoed in the cave. The flames burning all over her body became more and more violent. Her body gradually became transparent and blurry. After a few breaths, her divine body completely turned into spiritual light and completely dissipated. In the cave, only Ji Tianxing, who was standing in a daze with a complicated expression, and Yun Yao, who was filled with grief and tears in her eyes, were left. End of this chapter. Chapter 2468. As millions of spiritual lights merged into the world, Luo Shui completely disappeared. From then on, there was no such person in the world. Silence was restored in the cave. Ji Tianxing stood below the high platform in a daze. His expression was complicated, and his heart was heavy and sorrowful. He had never thought that everything was developing in a good direction. He had already seen the dawn of hope, but in the end, he was greeted with such a painful blow. In his mind, he could not help but recall the various things that happened between him and Luo Shui in his previous life. Countless scenes flashed through his mind like flashes of lightning. At that time, he was as cold as an iceberg and as unromantic as a block of wood. He was only grateful for Luo Shui's help and treated her as a trustworthy friend. Therefore, after he became a god, he would guide and help Luo Shui. Although he also knew that Luo Shui had always had feelings for him and silently accompanied him. However, he had no romantic feelings for Luo Shui. What he yearned for was the vast starry sky, the supreme path of godhood, the ultimate meaning of martial arts and life. The only thing he did not have was romantic love. Therefore, when he left the 5 elements world and ascended to the upper realm, he did not think of taking Luo Shui with him. However, he did not expect that after his rebirth in this life, Luo Shui still did not change her heart. She endured the torment of longing alone, swallowed the bitter fruit that she had created, and sacrificed her life to end all of this. In the end, it evolved into such an outcome. Sigh. The ill-fated relationship of the previous life, the debt of this life. Ji Tianxing sighed silently, feeling a little sad. After all, Luo Shui did not let him down in the slightest. She did not cross the line, abandon her conscience, and hurt him, Yun Yao, and the two children. At this point, it was useless to say anything more. What will come sooner or later. Fate always plays tricks on people. Perhaps the choice she made was the best result. This thought flashed through his mind. Ji Tianqing collected his thoughts and walked to the top of the high platform. At the same time, Yun Yao's consciousness gradually blurred and she fainted. Luo Shui's soul and memories were completely integrated into her soul, and the two were quickly fusing. This had a great impact on Yun Yao's soul, causing her to fall into a coma. Ji Tianqing quickly arrived in front of her and looked at her worriedly, releasing his divine sense to check her situation. Ji Tianqing breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that she was not injured and that the two children were safe and sound. He hurriedly used a secret technique to deactivate the many divine formations on the high platform. Soon, the hundreds of rope-like divine lights were withdrawn. Swish, swish. After the divine light dissipated, Yun Yao was freed and regained her freedom. Her divine power circulated naturally, protecting her mind and divine soul. This way, her divine soul would fuse with Luo Shui's divine soul and Goddess Yaoguang's memories, and her life would not be in danger. She sat motionlessly on the high platform with her eyes closed. Her body was glowing with a faint white light. Ji Tianqing knew that this process would not be short and would take a long time. Therefore, he sat beside Yun Yao and silently protected her. 3 days passed in a flash. That evening, on the ancient viewing platform, a graceful woman with a head of white hair wearing an ivory-white dress was standing by the jade railing, quietly looking at the sea of clouds in front of her. She was Fairy Yuqing. Even though she had changed into clean and tidy clothes and combed her hair, she did not look any different. However, her injuries had not healed. There were still numerous wounds all over her body, and her strength was also quite weak. She looked at the sea of clouds that flowed quietly in the sky and sighed with a bleak expression. Sigh. Luo Shui, you are still the silly girl that I know. No matter how firm your attitude was before, no matter how decisive you are still a kind person. You could not cross your conscience and bottom line, so you still sacrificed yourself to help them. Oh, if I had known this would happen, how could I have let you go to this step? Fairy Yuqing sighed to herself, her tone sorrowful and bleak. Gusts of cold wind blew, blowing at her waist-length white hair and clothes, adding to her desolate aura. At this time, a black-robed figure appeared in the sky above the ancient viewing platform and gradually became clear. The tall and burly black-robed man was the messenger of the divine ruins. There is no kindness on the path to immortality, and the 9 heavens are the most ruthless. Is it the 7 emotions and 6 desires that cause people to fall, or is it only by severing emotions that one can ascend to heaven? The messenger of the divine ruins muttered in a bleak tone. His voice was low and hoarse, but it had the charm of seeing through the prosperity of the world, and his heart was as calm as water. You're here. Fairy Yuqing did not turn around. She was still facing the sea of clouds and greeted him. The messenger of the divine ruins did not respond. After a moment of silence he asked, Your most beloved disciple died because of him. Do you hate him? Fairy Yuqing shook her head and said calmly, This is Luo Shui's own choice, I have no right to hate him. The messenger of the divine ruins nodded slightly and asked again, This matter is over, what are you going to do? Fairy Yuqing smiled bitterly and said desolately, Naturally, I will return to the heavenly sea, stay in jade-clear heaven, and wait for the end of my life to return to heaven and earth. Are you really going to extinguish the last glimmer of hope? The messenger of the divine ruins asked in a playful tone, That little girl has inherited everything of the ancient goddess. Perhaps in 10 years she will be able to break the seal and change heaven and earth? Fairy Yuqing was stunned for a moment. After a long silence she replied, If that's the case, then you and I both have a chance to leave this cage. Perhaps we don't have to turn into bones and sand. But don't forget, now that the continent is being invaded by foreign enemies, It's unknown whether she can withstand this calamity." The messenger of the divine ruins said in a playful tone, "Perhaps you and I can join forces and help her. It can be considered as seeking a chance of survival for us and for this world?" Fairy Yuqing smiled playfully and asked, "You and I are both otherworldly people. How can we interfere in the grudges of the world?" "Otherworldly people?" the messenger of the divine ruins said in a self-deprecating tone, "being trapped here and not even having the right to leave, how can you talk about being otherworldly? Moreover, this is not a grudge of the human world, but an invasion of foreign enemies. I think this should be an opportunity." Pausing for a moment, he said in a serious and solemn tone, "Last chance." Fairy Yuqing frowned and remained silent. After a long time, when the figure of the messenger of the divine ruins gradually blurred and was about to disappear, she nodded slightly and said, "In that case, I will believe you this time." The figure of the messenger of the divine ruins became clear again, and his tone was filled with relief. He nodded and said, "That's good. Then you don't have to return to the heavenly sea, just wait here. I have already deduced the secrets of heaven and predicted the future. Within 3 days the great calamity will descend. At that time life and death will depend on this." End of chapter. Chapter 2469. Within 3 days? The Great Tribulation is coming? Even though Fairy Yuqing's heart was as calm as still water, she could not help but change her expression. She had never thought that the Great Tribulation would come so quickly. However, she knew that the old man of the divine ruins had to consume his lifespan when he used a secret technique to pry into the secrets of the heavens. The results and future that he deduced were not absolutely correct, but they were not far from the truth. The messenger of the divine ruins nodded slightly and said earnestly, "So, you only have 3 days left. Heal your injuries as soon as possible." After saying that, he turned and left, disappearing into the sky. Fairy Yuqing frowned slightly. After thinking for a moment, she sat on the ancient viewing platform and began to heal her injuries. 3 days passed quickly. During this period of time, Ji Tianxing had been guarding by Yun Yao's side, not leaving her side at all. Yun Yao had also been unconscious. The two souls in her mind were still fusing quickly. Her entire body was still shining with a dense white light. As her aura continued to strengthen, it also became more mysterious. Ji Tianxing saw that her condition was stable and there was no danger, so he was relieved and at ease. It was already noon. The sky around the ancient viewing platform was covered by dark clouds and was as dark as ever. Suddenly, the wind blew in the sky. A biting cold wind blew in from the south, bringing with it a vast expanse of gray clouds, rolling towards the north. The cold wind was bone-piercingly cold and violent. It even carried a trace of faintly discernible killing intent. After a while, the gray clouds in the sky thousands of miles around the ancient viewing platform were blown away. The sun shone down from the sky, but it was not warm at all. Swoosh! Suddenly, a black light lit up in the sky in the south. It streaked across the sky like lightning and sped towards the ancient viewing platform. In the blink of an eye, the black light arrived near the ancient viewing platform and stopped. After the black light faded, a huge pitch-black battleship with a ferocious appearance appeared. This battleship was thousands of feet long and emitted a cold killing intent and an invisible suppressive force. There were several patterns engraved on the side of the battleship. They were mysterious and not complicated, but they exuded a domineering and majestic aura. Without a doubt, this was the battleship of the Heaven Slayer race. Crack! Crack! With a crisp sound of metal clashing, the door of the battleship opened. A tall pitch-black figure stepped out of the cabin door. It was a huge half-human, half-beast monster. His entire body was as black as ink, and his body was covered in black scales. 2 balls of purple flames danced in his large eyes. The most eye-catching thing was the 2 black dragons that extended from his shoulders. They were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, looking extremely ferocious. With such a unique physique and appearance, no matter which world it was in, it would attract attention and leave a deep impression. Clearly, he was the leader of the heaven-conquering army, the dragon-subduing general. Following closely behind General Dragon Subduing was a demon race expert who was 20 feet tall and was covered in black dragon scales. This person was wearing a sturdy and heavy black armor. He had a bald head covered in tattoos, and he held a pitch-black demonic blade in his wide hand. His eyes were like copper bells, flashing with a frightening cold light. His entire body was emitting a powerful and domineering demonic aura. Even though he was following closely behind General Dragon Fu, his aura and posture were obviously weaker than General Dragon Fu's. But if General Dragon Fu was not present, he would be the most domineering existence present. This newly ascended demon god was the former great demon saint, Ling Xian. Other than General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian, there were 8 other heaven-conquering army captains in silver armor who walked out of the cabin door in succession. They were like 8 loyal guards, following closely behind General Dragon Fu. Swoosh! General Dragon Fu stepped out of the battleship and came to the sky above the ancient viewing platform. He looked down at the ancient viewing platform from above, and his gaze landed on Fairy Yuqing. Fairy Yuqing had long seen the battleship approaching and had sensed the dangerous aura. She had already ended her cultivation. She still sat on the platform with a calm expression, looking indifferently at General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian. The two parties stared at each other for a moment, not revealing any hostility or killing intent. But the atmosphere between heaven and earth quietly became oppressive. Even the air seemed to have frozen. General Dragon Fu finally spoke. He asked Fairy Yuqing in broken human language, "I see the shadow and aura of Luo Shui martial god on you. What is your relationship with Luo Shui martial god?" For nearly 3,000 years, Luo Shui had been known as the #1 beauty of the Shenwu continent. Her appearance and temperament were unparalleled. However, in the era 6,000 years ago, Fairy Yuqing had also been a peerless fairy who had swept the world and attracted the hearts of millions of men. Even though she was now old and in her twilight years, her beauty was still unparalleled, and her temperament was elegant and outstanding. Fairy Yuqing glanced at General Dragon Fu and said calmly, "I am Luo Shui's master. If I'm not wrong, you must be General Dragon Fu of the heaven-conquering army, right?" General Dragon Fu was stunned and said in surprise, "Luo Shui's master? She actually has a master? And she's still alive?" Ling Xian, who was standing behind him, quickly explained, "General, you may not know this, but according to the rumors circulating in my clan, Luo Shui does indeed have a master. However, her master was a peerless fairy from 5,000 years ago. Later on, she lived in seclusion overseas and never cared about worldly affairs. Looking at this white-haired woman's strength and appearance, she should be Luo Shui's master." General Dragon Fu nodded slightly and stared coldly at Fairy Yuqing. He sneered, "A person who lives in seclusion who doesn't care about worldly affairs has actually appeared here and guessed my identity. It looks like Luo Shui has already told you. Let me ask you, where is Luo Shui hiding? If you don't tell me the truth, I'll kill you as a sacrifice." Fairy Yuqing looked at him expressionlessly and said slowly, "Luo Shui has already fallen and returned to the heavens and earth. She didn't tell me anything about you. It's just that you're so ugly, and in the entire Shenwu continent, you can't find a monster as ugly as you. That's why I was able to guess your identity with a single glance." Her tone was very calm, without the slightest bit of anger, as if she was stating a fact. However, the more she was like this, the angrier General Dragon Fu became, and his eyes surged with killing intent. "Old woman, you're challenging my bottom line. Are you courting death? Speak quickly. Where is Luo Shui?" Fairy Yuqing spoke again. "I've already said that she has already fallen and returned to the heavens and earth." "Impossible." General Dragon Subduing didn't believe this news at all. he shouted coldly without hesitation. Ling Xian also shouted angrily, "Old woman, you still have the nerve to say such a clumsy lie?" Luo Shui was one of the 3 martial gods. Besides General Dragon Fu, who else could have killed her? Fairy Yuqing shook her head lightly and said indifferently, "When did I say that she was killed? She killed herself." Hearing this, General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian both frowned and looked at each other doubtfully. End of chapter. Chapter 2470. A few days ago, General Long Fu had used a secret technique to detect that there were powerful fluctuations of divine power in the ruins of God. He knew that martial god Tian Ju had been killed, and the ancestral god fiend had also fallen. Martial god Taihao had been severely injured and must have hidden away to recuperate. There were only a few martial gods left in the Shenwu continent. Therefore, the fluctuations of divine power in the ruins of God were most likely related to Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui. Therefore, General Long Fu had brought Ling Xian and the other captains to the ruins of God as quickly as possible. This time, he wanted to kill Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui in the ruins of God to completely end the war. As long as Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui were dead, no one would be able to resist the invasion and rule of the Heaven Punisher. General Long Fu was here to fight. However, he had not expected to see Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui after arriving at the ruins of God. Instead, he saw a white-haired woman. The white-haired woman claimed to be Luo Shui's master and said that Luo Shui had committed suicide. General Long Fu could not accept this result. He temporarily suppressed his anger and killing intent and stared at Fairy Yuqing with a sharp gaze. He continued to ask, "Old woman, I'll ask you one more thing. Where is Ji Tianqing? This is your last chance. If you hide anything from me, kill me." Fairy Yuqing glanced at him, and the corners of her mouth curled into a contemptuous sneer. She slowly stood up and said indifferently, "I don't know Ji Tianqing, so how would I know where he is?" After getting this answer, General Long Fu's patience was exhausted, and he truly wanted to kill her. "Very good. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish." With that, General Long Fu waved his hand and ordered, "Kill her!" The 8 silver-armored captains drew their swords and sabers. After roaring, they pounced toward Fairy Yuqing with murderous intent. Swish! 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 Everyone attacked from all directions. At the same time, they waved their swords and sabers, slashing out bloody blades that blotted out the sky and earth, releasing an invisible pressure. Suddenly, the ancient viewing platform with a radius of 5 kilometers was drowned in the light of swords and sabers. Fairy Yuqing was under the light blades that filled the sky. She was under great pressure and her eyes became solemn. Even though the captains were only at the 2nd or 3rd level of the martial god realm, they were still able to defeat the captains. Usually, Fairy Yuqing did not take them seriously at all. She could easily defeat and kill them. However, there were as many as 8 captains and their teamwork was flawless. In addition, Fairy Yuqing had not recovered from her serious injuries and only had about 60% of her strength left. Faced with the full power of the 8 captains, she had no choice but to be cautious and give it her all. She didn't hold back at all. She summoned the sea god's shield without hesitation and poured her divine power into it. Instantly, the sea god's shield expanded to the size of a mountain, releasing an icy blue radiance that soared into the sky. Bang, 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 bang! The crimson blades that blotted out the sky and covered the earth viciously struck the sea god's shield, resulting in a series of earth-shattering booms. The divine shield trembled unceasingly. Cold light burst out and emitted a dull buzzing sound. However, the 8 captains were unable to break through the divine shield's defense even after several consecutive attacks. Under the protection of the divine shield, Fairy Yuqing was safe and sound. She formed hand seals with both hands and activated the sea god's shield to spin rapidly. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The spikes and blades at the edge of the divine shield immediately released thousands of icy blue light blades and spears, piercing fiercely toward the 8 captains. Instantly, the icy blue light exploded and tore through the sky, dazzling and eye-catching. Faced with such a powerful attack, the 8 captains' expressions were solemn as they desperately waved their swords and sabers to block. Boom, 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 boom. Another deafening boom erupted, reverberating endlessly in the sky. Although the 8 captains joined forces to block the light blades and ice spears, they were under great pressure. However, the pressure on them was extremely great, and they were all shaken to the point of retreating repeatedly. Some of them were even injured, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Seeing this scene, General Dragon Subduing frowned and said coldly, "Damn old woman, she is indeed stronger than Luo Shui." Obviously, it was difficult for the 8 captains to complete their mission, let alone kill Fairy Yuqing. Thus, General Dragon Subduing ordered the battleship high in the sky, fire the cannons and turn her into ashes. There were 6 captains and dozens of heaven-punishing race warriors guarding the battleship. After receiving the order, everyone immediately activated the battleship's array formation. Ka. The metal plate on the side of the battleship opened, revealing a row of black cannon muzzles. Dark red light lit up in them, brewing a power that could destroy the world. Boom! In the next moment, the hundreds of cannon muzzles suddenly spewed out dark red flames that were as red as blood. The blood-red divine flames condensed into hundreds of light pillars that fiercely blasted toward Fairy Yuqing on the ancient viewing platform. Instantly, the world within 1,000 miles was illuminated by the flames. A destructive aura enveloped the entire area, erupting with an unparalleled oppressive force. Fairy Yuqing, who was on the ancient viewing platform, felt a great pressure and danger. Her eyes were filled with shock and anger. She had a faint premonition that with her strength and the sea god's shield, she would not be able to block the bombardment of the battleship. Hundreds of blood-red light pillars descended from the sky and were about to drown Fairy Yuqing. At this critical moment, a burly black figure suddenly appeared in the sky and let out a deep and majestic roar. "How dare you behave so atrociously in my territory? You must be tired of living." The burly black-robed man was the messenger of the divine ruins. He raised his arms and waved his wide sleeves. His right palm was like a blade as it slashed toward the sky. Boom! In an instant, a dazzling white divine light ruthlessly split open the sky, creating a pitch-black crack that was hundreds of miles long. And this huge spatial crack was right above the ancient viewing platform. The hundreds of blood-red light pillars were blocked by the spatial crack. They fiercely blasted into the pitch-black void and disappeared on the spot. Immediately after, the messenger of the divine ruins waved his left palm and sent out a golden divine light that covered the sky and earth. It turned into 8 divine dragon phantoms that blasted toward the 8 silver-armored captains. Boom, 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 boom. With a series of muffled sounds, the 8 captains were caught off guard and were all blasted away by the divine dragon phantoms. They spat out mouthfuls of blood. All of this took a long time to describe, but it happened in the blink of an eye. As soon as the messenger of the divine ruins appeared, he only used 2 moves to resolve Fairy Yuqing's crisis and injured the 8 captains. General Long Fu and Ling Xian were stunned for a moment. They turned to look at the messenger of the divine ruins at the same time, their eyes filled with caution. Without a doubt, both of them could see that the messenger of the divine ruins' strength and methods were stronger than Fairy Yuqing's. Fairy Yuqing came back to her senses and looked at the messenger of the divine ruins with a complicated gaze. She asked, "Old man, you clearly hid your strength before. You deliberately let me win?" A few months ago, she had brought Luo Shui to the divine ruins and defeated the messenger of the divine ruins, allowing Luo Shui to enter the cemetery of the gods. This made her think that her strength was slightly stronger than the messenger of the divine ruins. But now she realized that the truth was not what she thought. End of chapter. Chapter 2471. Fairy Yu Qing and the messenger of the divine ruins had known each other for thousands of years. At that time, their relationship was neither close nor far. There was no grudge between them, nor was there a deep friendship between them. Until thousands of years later, the few remaining martial gods of that era passed away one after another. The two of them became the oldest and only two surviving martial gods. From then on, there was a sense of mutual appreciation between the two of them. Now that Fairy Yu Qing understood the truth, she guessed the messenger of the divine ruins' thoughts. He had long been unwilling to be trapped here, and wanted to unlock the world's seal to find a chance to ascend to the upper realm. Thinking of this, Fairy Yu Qing looked at the messenger of the divine ruins with a complicated expression. She thought to herself, this old fellow deliberately hid his strength and had the idea of leaving the cage long ago. He must have made preparations long ago. He has guarded the divine ruins for thousands of years and most likely obtained some benefits from the divine ruins. It's either a divine Tao inheritance or a divine artifact. Just as Fairy Yu Qing was guessing, General Dragon Subduing and Ling Xian attacked. The two of them used their ultimate skills at the same time and punched out dozens of bloody fist shadows, releasing overwhelming demonic fire that poured toward the messenger of the divine ruins. The messenger of the divine ruins hurriedly waved his palms and punched out palm shadows that collided with the dozens of fist shadows, creating a series of earth-shattering sounds. Bam! 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 Following a muffled explosion, the sky was shattered, revealing a large expanse of black space. The demonic fire that covered the sky drowned the messenger of the divine ruins like a flood. However, the black robe that the messenger of the divine ruins was wearing lit up with a dazzling sacred golden light, protecting him like a shield. No matter how much the demonic fire attacked, it could not hurt him at all. Seeing this scene, Fairy Yu Qing was enlightened and muttered to herself, I didn't notice it before, but now it seems that the black robe he's wearing is a divine artifact. General Dragon Subduing also frowned, and a cold, killing intent flashed in his eyes. The messenger of the divine ruins is actually so powerful? He can stand shoulder to shoulder with me? He suddenly turned his head and looked at Ling Xian beside him. Ling Xian, why didn't you say so earlier? Ling Xian explained awkwardly, Lord General, please calm down. I have never come into contact with the emissary of the ruins of God before, so I do not know his true strength. Dragon Subduing General glared at him angrily but didn't say anything. After that, General Dragon Subduing sent a voice transmission to the captain and soldiers on the warship. Leave this place immediately and search for Luo Shui and Ji Tianxing. Upon receiving his order, the warship immediately flew away and began to search the surrounding mountains. The Dragon Subduing General and Ling Xian joined forces to attack the emissary of the divine ruins. The 8 silver-armored captains regained their composure and attacked Fairy Yu Qing with all their might. The two sides fought fiercely high in the sky, and it was difficult to determine the victor in a short period of time. At the same time, several thousand li away from the ancient viewing platform, in the cave deep underground, Yun Yao was still sleeping. Her soul was still fusing. Ji Tianxing stayed by her side, quietly waiting for her to complete the fusion. But at this moment, divine power fluctuations came from outside the cave, accompanied by deafening explosions. The cave's protective array shook from the shock waves and lit up with dazzling divine light. Ji Tianxing was immediately awakened. He quickly got up and left the cave. He quietly flew out of the ground and hid in the sky. In the direction of the ancient viewing platform, layers of divine power shockwaves spread out like ripples. There were also loud rumbles and explosions that continued. Ji Tianxing immediately frowned. With a gloomy expression, he muttered, "It's a battle between martial gods. Not only are there martial gods of the heaven-punishing race, there are also demon gods." Of course, he could see that there was demonic chi and bloody light in the soaring divine light thousands of li away. The continuous divine power fluctuations also contained the aura of the heaven-punishing race. Ji Tianxing immediately realized that the experts of the heaven-punishing race and the ancestor demon god had come. However, he was filled with doubts and thought to himself, the ancestor demon god is still alive? He was severely injured by my divine sword. Even if he was lucky enough to survive, he would be extremely weak. How could he recover his strength and make a comeback in such a short period of time? How could he be together with the martial gods of the heaven-punishing race? Even though Ji Tianxing racked his brains, he could not figure out the truth and reason. Therefore, he quietly flew across the sky and decided to go to the ancient viewing platform to see what was going on. However, he had only flown 1,000 li when he saw a black shadow as large as a mountain speeding toward him from the side. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, the 3,000-meter-long black shadow flew past him and headed straight for the mountain peak where Yun Yao was. The heaven-punishing race's battleship? Look at the symbol and insignia of the battleship. Could it be General Fu Long's battleship? Although the battleship was fast, it could not escape Ji Tianxing's detection. He turned around without hesitation and chased after the battleship. A moment later, when he caught up to the battleship, it had also stopped above the mountain. Obviously, the captains on the battleship had used divine arrays and special methods to detect the divine arrays and caves underground. The battleship stopped in the sky. After a moment of hesitation, it opened the metal deck on the side, revealing a row of black cannon muzzles. Hundreds of cannon muzzles were aimed at the underground cave, and dark red light was brewing in them. The cave where Yun Yao was about to be bombarded by the battleship. Once the light pillars came down, a deep pit with a radius of a few hundred li would be blasted into the ground. The underground cave would also be greatly damaged. Yun Yao would definitely be affected and her life would be in danger. At this critical moment, Ji Tianxing stepped forward without hesitation. He waved the burial of heaven and slashed out a sword light that was thousands of li long. Sky-splitting sword. The giant golden sword that was thousands of li long struck the giant battleship with endless power. With a loud boom, the huge warship was sent flying on the spot, tumbling hundreds of miles away. The giant golden sword shattered on the spot, bursting into golden fragments that covered the sky and scattered in the sky. The battleship was sent flying hundreds of li away before it dissipated the impact and stopped in the sky. There was a 3-inch deep dent in the battleship that was about 100 meters long where the giant sword had struck it. This was only a light injury to the battleship. It would not affect its normal operation or battle. The captains on the warship and the many soldiers of the Heaven Punisher race were still in a state of shock and fear. Everyone looked at Ji Tianxing in the sky. When they saw his appearance, they immediately cried out in surprise. "It's Ji Tianxing!" "That's right, it's him." "Ha ha ha! Lord General guessed correctly. Ji Tianxing is really here. Kill him! Kill him quickly, and we'll be able to obtain the greatest merit. Everyone, don't be rash. That kid is very powerful. He can even kill the ancestral fiend god. Our top priority is to report this to the general." End of chapter. Chapter 2472. The captains had different opinions. Some people were wild with joy. They only wanted to kill Ji Tianxing immediately and obtain the first-class merit. Some were cautious and suggested reporting the news to the dragon-subduing general first. However, they quickly finished their discussion and reached a consensus. One of the captains sent a message to the dragon-subduing general. The other 3 captains controlled the battleship and released hundreds of blood-colored light pillars towards Ji Tianxing. Boom! Amidst a deafening explosion, hundreds of light pillars shot out like a rainbow that streaked across the sky and enveloped Ji Tianxing's figure. The captains were all confident and full of anticipation as they stared at the sky without blinking. They thought that no matter how strong Ji Tianxing was, he wouldn't be able to block the bombardment of the dragon-subduing battleship. However, the next scene made everyone dumbfounded. When the blood-colored light pillars engulfed Ji Tianxing, His figure disappeared into thin air. He had become one with the vast heaven and earth. His aura was still in this heaven and earth, but his divine body no longer existed. It was as if he was the heaven and earth, and the heaven and earth were him. Boom! The hundreds of blood-colored light pillars missed and slammed into the barren land, creating an earth-shattering explosion. Instantly, 2 mountains that were thousands of feet tall were blasted into powder. The ground within a 500-mile radius was also blasted into a huge pit like an abyss. Endless smoke and dust rose into the air, obscuring the sky and the sun. Violent and devastating shockwaves spread out in all directions, causing the ground within a radius of 3,000 miles to tremble. Such destructive power was truly terrifying. However, the captains knew that this attack had missed and didn't hurt Ji Tianxing. Even the cave they had discovered earlier wasn't damaged. After all, that cave was a few hundred miles away from the huge pit. The captains looked at each other. For the time being, they were at a loss of what to do. That brat Ji Tianxing is hiding. What should we do? Find a way to find him? Why don't we ignore Ji Tianxing and destroy that cave first? Yes, there's something strange about that cave. It must be related to Ji Tianxing. After discussing for a while, everyone immediately came up with an idea. Thus, the battleship flew towards the cave and accumulated a large amount of power, preparing to fire. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing, who was the embodiment of heaven and earth, was instantly enraged. Killing intent surged in his heart. These heaven crushers are despicable and deserve to die. Through observing the reaction of the battleship, he guessed that only the captain of the Heaven Punisher race was on the battleship. General Dragon Subduing was not there. After all, given the dragon subduing general's strength, there was no need for him to go through so much trouble. He could just fight him head-on. Soon, the hundreds of cannons on the side of the warship began to accumulate dark red light. Ji Tianxing did not hesitate to take out the god-slaying flying dagger. He used his divine psyche to control the flying dagger and stabbed it towards the battleship. Swish! The 3-inch-long god-slaying flying dagger streaked across the sky with a resplendent golden light. In a quarter of an instant, the flying dagger pierced the side of the warship. At this moment, the flying knife suddenly expanded thousands of times, turning into a dark golden giant blade that was hundreds of feet long. Boom! Crack! The dark golden giant blade pierced the side of the battleship. There was an earth-shattering explosion, and black metal shrapnel filled the sky. More than 30 cannons on the side of the battleship were shattered or cut off by the flying dagger. A 100-meter-long gap appeared on the hull of the battleship, and the situation inside could be clearly seen. Ji Tianxing even saw the Heaven Punisher warriors in the battleship through the large gap. Their faces were filled with shock. The berserk and unparalleled force of impact once again sent the warship flying, tumbling tens of li away. The remaining dozens of cannons continued to shoot out dark red light beams. However, the direction of those dozens of light pillars deviated and actually blasted towards the sky. The plan of the captains was once again foiled by Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing took the opportunity to attack the battleship. He swung his sword, sending out cold light beams toward the gap in the battleship. At the same time, he used his divine psyche to control the god-slaying flying dagger to attack the battleship from the side. Swish! 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 More than 30 sharp sword lights pierced through the gap in the battleship and pierced into the battleship, accurately piercing a dozen Heaven Punisher warriors. With a series of muffled explosions, the dozen or so heaven-punishing warriors exploded into clouds of blood mist and disintegrated on the spot. The surviving Heaven Punisher warriors roared in fear and cursed angrily. The captains were also flustered. They hurriedly piloted the battleship to counterattack. However, before they could attack, Ji Tianxing teleported behind the battleship. Whoosh! The god-slaying flying dagger appeared out of thin air, pierced through the gap in the battleship, and charged into the battleship. Swish! 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 In just a few breaths, the god-slaying flying dagger flew around the battleship and pierced through a dozen metal walls, instantly killing more than 30 Heaven Punisher warriors. Even one of the captains could not dodge in time. His legs were cut off by the god-slaying flying dagger. In an instant, cries of agony filled the battleship, and blood splattered everywhere. The 4 captains could not be bothered to deal with Ji Tianqing. They could only desperately block the god-slaying flying dagger. However, at that moment, Ji Tianqing swung the Burial of Heaven sword again and struck the battleship. Boom! Crack! With a loud boom, the battleship was sent flying 300 miles away. It rolled and crashed into a valley. Boom! With a loud boom, the valley was blasted into a deep abyss. The surrounding mountains were also flattened, leaving behind a scene of desolation. Smoke and dust that covered the sky drifted down and covered the entire battleship. The previously mysterious, majestic, and ferocious battleship was now covered in scars and deformed. At first glance, the 10,000-foot-long battleship looked like scrap metal. The god-slaying flying dagger had basically killed all the Heaven Punisher warriors in the battleship. The remaining 4 captains had also been injured by the god-slaying flying dagger. They were fleeing in panic. They had to accept reality. This battleship with powerful defenses was no longer a safe fortress. Instead, it was a cage that prevented them from escaping and trapped them. Helpless, the 4 captains could only abandon the battleship and flee. Swish! 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 The 4 of them opened the cabin door and fled the battleship. They turned into streaks of blood-red light and flew into the sky. At the same time, Ji Tianqing, who was guarding above the ruins, charged over with his sword. Ha ha! I was waiting for you to walk right into my trap. Ji Tianqing sneered. He waved his sword in his right hand and sent out dozens of sword beams. His left hand struck out with a dragon claw as large as a mountain. Bam! 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 3 captains were stabbed by the sword beams. A series of muffled sounds rang out, and blood splattered everywhere. The 4th captain was hit by the illusory dragon claw. He fell from the sky and smashed into the ground. His body cracked open and blood spurted out. Without the protection of the battleship, the 4 captains were immediately severely injured. They were in imminent danger. End of chapter. Chapter 2473. Sword Rain. Ji Tianqing pointed his sword at the sky and shouted coldly. In the next instant, tens of thousands of star swords descended from the sky. The 4 injured silver-armored captains looked up at the meteor-like swords and felt a chill run down their spines. Their eyes were filled with despair. An extremely heavy force suppressed them, giving them no chance to escape. At this critical moment, they could only use their last bit of strength to resist with all their might. Boom! 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 The star swords covered a radius of hundreds of miles and produced earth-shattering sounds. The stars were dazzling, and dust filled the sky. The loud sounds were endless, and the ground within thousands of miles was trembling. The 4 silver-armored captains endured the attacks of countless star swords and were quickly reduced to ashes. 10 seconds later, when all the star swords dissipated, the 4 captains also ceased to exist. Without any hesitation, Ji Tianqing rushed into the underground cave as fast as a bolt of lightning. The 2 divine arrays protecting the cave had already been damaged to varying degrees and were not far from being destroyed. Fortunately, the interior of the cave was still intact, and Yun Yao was safe. Ji Tianqing hurriedly opened the sword world and put the sleeping Yun Yao inside. Only then could Yun Yao be considered safe. He turned and left the cave, crossing the sky and flying toward the ancient viewing platform. Dozens of seconds later, Ji Tianqing arrived near the ancient viewing platform. He was still hundreds of miles away, but he could already see the colorful divine light in the distant sky covering thousands of miles. A few figures were flickering in and out of the divine light, shuttling back and forth. Among the 3 people closest to him, One was a tall and burly elder in a black robe. He was the messenger of the divine ruins. As for the other two, one was the ferocious-looking General Dragon Fu, who was as large as a mountain. There was also a bald man from the demon race. He was the great demon sage, Ling Xian, whose appearance had changed greatly. General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian were attacking the messenger of the divine ruins. From the looks of it, the messenger of the divine ruins was at a disadvantage. He was covered in injuries and bloodstains, looking somewhat pathetic. The dragon-subduing general and Ling Xian had the upper hand, but it wasn't easy for them. Both of them had suffered heavy injuries, especially Ling Xian's injuries. In the short term, it would be difficult to determine the victor between the two sides. It wasn't an easy task for General Dragon Subduing and Ling Xian to kill the emissary of the divine ruins. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned, revealing a deep sense of doubt. Why is General Dragon Subduing and Ling Xian together? Join forces to deal with the old man of the godly ruins? In a short 2 months, how did Ling Xian break through the deity realm and become a fiend celestial? Ling Xian's divine soul aura was actually very similar to the ancestral devil gods. Could it be that Ling Xian had rescued the ancestral demon god and seized the opportunity when the ancestral demon god was on the brink of death to steal the ancestral demon god's soul? Moreover, after Ling Xian became a demon god, he joined the dragon-subduing general? In a short moment, Ji Tianxing analyzed the answer. In his opinion, this was the only explanation that made sense. However, he still felt that this was too absurd. Ling Xian was the ancestral demon god's most trusted and most valued great fiend celestial, but in the end, he betrayed the ancestral demon god when he was on the brink of death. After that, Ling Xian turned around and joined the dragon-subduing general, making the fiend celestial race a vassal of the heaven punisher race. If the ancestral demon god was still alive, he would probably explode from anger even if he didn't die, right? Ji Tianxing thought to himself, the corners of his mouth curled up in a contemptuous sneer. He looked at the sky thousands of miles away, even further away. There, several captains in silver armor were desperately besieging a white-haired woman. Ji Tianxing's gaze immediately fell on the white-haired woman, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. Of course, he could recognize that the white-haired woman was the assassin who had attacked him previously. Before Luo Shui died, he had revealed the true identity of the white-haired woman. It was actually his master, Fairy Yuqing. Now, Fairy Yuqing was besieged by several captains of the Heaven Punisher race. Her injuries were very miserable, and she was in a precarious situation. Ji Tianxing could not help but think to himself, if Fairy Yuqing is willing to help Luo Shui stall for time, it means that she also knows of Luo Shui's plan. However, Luo Shui reined in the horse at the edge of the cliff and sacrificed himself. It has already been a few days, so Fairy Yuqing must know. But she actually doesn't blame me and doesn't seek revenge? Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing did not hesitate to fly over and help Fairy Yuqing. Swoosh! He arrived near the battlefield and appeared behind a silver-armored captain in a flash. Before the captain could react, he waved his sword and stabbed out 7 cold beams. Swish! 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 7 dazzling sword beams enveloped the captain like a bright moon. With a muffled bang, the captain was stabbed by the sword beams. His armor and body collapsed at the same time, exploding into a rain of blood. This sudden scene not only frightened the other captains, but also stunned Fairy Yuqing. When she saw that the person who attacked was Ji Tianxing, she also revealed a trace of surprise and her eyes became complicated. At this moment, the other captains came back to their senses and waved their long sabers and swords, surrounding Ji Tianxing. The pressure on Fairy Yuqing was greatly reduced. She hurriedly took out a few pills and swallowed them, circulating her energy to suppress her injuries. Ji Tianxing used the Big Dipper nebula steps and held the Burial of Heaven sword as he fought with the captains. The divine sword danced, constantly stabbing out dazzling sword beams. His left palm flew up and down, constantly striking out palm shadows and dragon claws that blotted out the sky, sending the captains flying one after another. In the dark, the god-slaying flying dagger remained invisible, lurking in the void, ready to launch a fatal attack at any time. Bang! 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 Swish! Swish! Loud sounds kept erupting, and the colorful sword beams and palm shadows covered hundreds of miles of the sky. In a short span of 10 breaths, 3 captains had been killed by the Heaven-Burier sword, their bodies smashed into pieces. 2 other captains were smashed into meat paste by the heaven-capturing dragon claws and shattered into countless pieces. At this point, the 6 captains who besieged Fairy Yuqing were all killed by Ji Tianqing. Before Ji Tianqing arrived, Fairy Yuqing had already killed 2 captains. All 8 captains were dead, and the battle was over. Ji Tianqing held the burial of Heaven's sword and flew to stand in front of Fairy Yuqing. Fairy Yuqing looked at him with a calm expression and asked, "I attacked you before, but you didn't care about the past and even helped me out?" Ji Tianqing looked at her with a complicated gaze and said in a low voice, "Senior, Luo Shui has already told me the truth." Fairy Yuqing nodded slightly and asked again, "She couldn't get over herself and chose to sacrifice herself, right?" Ji Tianqing nodded silently with a bitter look on his face. Fairy Yuqing forced a smile and comforted, "You don't have to blame yourself, we should all respect her choice. Don't just stand there, the old man can't hold on any longer, we have to help him." With that, she flew towards the messenger of the ruins of God. Ji Tianqing also collected his thoughts and followed with the burial of Heaven's sword. End of chapter. Chapter 2474. Dragon fighting in the wild. General Dragon subduing roared as he waved his huge palms and sent out 2 balls of dark red light toward the messenger of the divine ruins. The 2 black dragons on his shoulders also opened their huge mouths and let out a high-pitched roar. Whoosh! Whoosh! The 2 black dragons emitted endless black light and formed 2 black dragon shadows that chased after the 2 balls of bloody light toward the messenger of the divine ruins. Black Sun Hurricane. At the same time, Ling Xian also roared as he waved his palms and released an earth-shattering black hurricane. Whoosh! Whoosh! The black hurricane turned into 900-mile-tall tornadoes that surged toward the messenger of the divine ruins from all directions and sealed off the surrounding area. This area immediately became chaotic. Facing the combined attack of 2 strong cultivators, the messenger of the divine ruins remained calm and used his divine power to activate the power of the black robe. Whoosh! The black robe he was wearing suddenly lit up with a dazzling golden light that formed a huge shield. Bam! 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 The 2 balls of bloody light and the 2 black dragon shadows slammed into the golden shield with a deafening sound. The bloody light exploded and the black dragon shadows also shattered and dissipated in the sky. However, a crack appeared on the golden light barrier, and golden light shards burst out from it. Naturally, another tear appeared on the black robe, and shreds of cloth fluttered in the wind. The messenger of the divine ruins' body shook as he hurriedly used his divine power to repair the crack on the shield. However, right at this moment, 9 sky-piercing hurricanes descended upon him, enveloping him and ruthlessly crushing him. The black tornado revolved at an extremely high speed, grinding and rubbing against the golden light shield, uttering cracking noises. As the tornado collapsed and shattered, the golden light shield also shattered inch by inch, turning into golden light fragments that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Finally, when the golden shield collapsed, there were still 4 black tornadoes left. Whoosh! 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 The black tornadoes engulfed the messenger of the divine ruins and spun rapidly, trying to kill him. Seeing this, General Dragon subduing and Ling Xian heaved a sigh of relief. This was especially true of General Dragon Fu, whose eyes were filled with disdain as he sneered, "The guardian of the ancient ruins and the strongest person on the Shenwu continent? Ha ha! It's nothing more than that. You will all be annihilated by my hands. I am the strongest person in this world, the future ruler." Soon, the power of the 4 black tornadoes was exhausted and they gradually dissipated. Shwa! The emissary of the divine ruins flew out of the black light fragment and staggered back into the sky. His appearance became even more miserable and disheveled. His black robe was full of holes, with more than a dozen pieces of cloth fluttering in the wind. Even the black cloak he was wearing was torn to shreds by the hurricane. Without the cover of the cloak, he revealed his true appearance. A wrinkled, bronze-skinned face appeared before everyone's eyes. His face was old but resolute, filled with a firm and unyielding expression. On his square face, there was a pair of thick eyebrows that were like dragons, and a pair of turbid eyes that were filled with wisdom and calmness. This was a face that was dignified without being angry, causing others to feel deep veneration. But the most eye-catching thing was that on the emissary of the divine ruins' forehead, there was a special diamond-shaped mark that was faintly discernible under a few strands of white hair. Suddenly seeing that strange-looking imprint, General Dragon subduing frowned. Ling Xian was also stunned and let out a cry of disbelief. "Heavens! You're actually not human?" Indeed, the emissary of the divine ruins' appearance and body shape were no different from a human's. He had always been wearing a large black robe and a large cloak, which concealed his true appearance. As a result, no one in the world had ever seen his true appearance. Everyone thought that the emissary of the divine ruins was the martial god of the human race, the most mysterious human powerhouse. But now, his cloak had been destroyed and his true appearance had been revealed. Only then did everyone discover this secret. At this time, Fairy Yu Qing rushed over with Ji Tianqing and arrived behind General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian. The two of them were about to attack General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian when they were stunned by the scene in front of them. Both of them were stunned and looked at the emissary of the divine ruins in disbelief. Their eyes were filled with shock and astonishment. Especially Fairy Yu Qing. This scene had the greatest impact on her. She had always thought that she was the only one in the world who understood the emissary of the divine ruins the best. But now she realized that she was wrong. She didn't understand the emissary of the divine ruins at all. She was even kept in the dark about whether the other party was a human or a foreign race. A strong sense of unfamiliarity rose from the bottom of her heart. Ji Tianqing frowned and looked at the emissary of the divine ruins, staring at the diamond-shaped mark on his forehead. For some reason, his long-dormant divine soul memories became blurred and chaotic again. His consciousness was temporarily in a trance and overlapped, and many strange and bizarre images appeared in his mind. Especially that strange diamond-shaped mark, which flashed through his mind more than 30 times in a single thought. There were golden ones, dark red ones, purple ones, blue ones, white ones, and even black ones. They were all diamond-shaped marks of various colors, and there were some changes on the marks, which made them even more mysterious. The sudden change caused a strong thought to emerge in Ji Tianqing's mind. I've seen this strange diamond-shaped mark somewhere before. Also, I should be very familiar with it. I've seen many different colored marks. What race is the person who has this kind of mark? He vaguely remembered some fragmented images, but he couldn't remember what they were. His divine soul memories kept surging, but it was difficult for a complete memory fragment to appear. Ji Tianqing knew very well that the divine soul memories of his previous life had yet to be fully awakened. There were even more secrets hidden in the depths of his divine soul memories, waiting for him to unearth and unravel them. At this moment, General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian came back to their senses. Their attention shifted from the emissary of the divine ruins and focused on Ji Tianqing. TSK. Ji Tianqing, you've indeed appeared. General Dragon Fu looked at him with a burning gaze, and a bloodthirsty sneer appeared on his face. Ling Xian also revealed a mocking sneer and said to Ji Tianqing, "Ji Tianqing, how have you been? Speaking of which, I still have to thank you properly. If you didn't severely injure the ancestor fiend god, how would I have the chance to replace it and become the new fiend god? General Dragon Fu and Ling Xian came here to kill Ji Tianqing and Luo Shui. Now that Ji Tianqing had appeared, the two of them naturally had to get down to business and didn't want to be entangled with the emissary of the divine ruins. After Ji Tianqing heard Ling Xian's words, he sneered with contempt. I didn't guess wrongly. The ancestor fiend god saw you as his right-hand man, but in the end, he was betrayed by you and his divine soul was taken over by you. The despicableness and savagery of the fiend god race are indeed of the same origin. Ling Xian was mocked by him, but he didn't feel embarrassed or angry. He smiled and said, as the saying goes, the winner takes all. I was able to take over the ancestor fiend god's power and replace it to become the new fiend god. That means that my scheming and methods are above it, and I'm more suitable to be the leader of the fiend god race. Old Tai, set a small goal first. Remember new 8th Chinese Networko. Chapter 2475. Ling Xian's smug look made Ji Tianqing feel even more nauseous. He looked at Ling Xian from the corner of his eyes and said expressionlessly, the ancestor fiend celestial is an ancient great fiend celestial and was once the death god that struck fear in the hearts of the 100 races. Although I hate it and want to kill it, I have to admit that it is indeed a once-in-a-lifetime fiend celestial. At least, it will never submit to others and will not let the entire fiend celestial race become the vassals and slaves of other races. Ling Xian heard the sarcasm in Ji Tianqing's words and sneered disapprovingly. Ji Tianqing, no matter how strong a person is, he is still a cold corpse. Only the living have the right to talk about strength of character and dignity. As the saying goes, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. Now that the Heaven Punishers have swept the world and no one can stop them, General Dragon Subduing is the most majestic tree. Only by following in the footsteps of General Dragon Subduing can the fiend celestial race rule the world and be above the 100 races. And you and your fellow humans will suffer heavy casualties and become the slaves of the Heaven Punishers. Of course, you won't be able to see this, because today you are going to die and be buried here. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and sneered. You have already explained very clearly what it means to be a dog relying on its master's power. Do you think that you have nothing to worry about and have a bright future just because you have General Dragon Subduing? Ha ha! Who knows if today is the day you die and this place is not your burial ground. Ling Xian frowned fiercely and his eyes shone with a fierce light. He said in a venomous tone, it's useless to argue. I will kill you now. As he said that, Ling Xian raised the pitch-black demonic blade in his hand and activated the power of calamity, condensing a pitch-black blade light on the demonic blade. Fairy Yu Qing stepped out and said to Ji Tianqing behind her, Ji Tianqing, help the old man kill General Dragon Subduing. Leave this clown to me. Fairy Yu Qing was about to activate the Sea God Shield and kill Ling Xian. General Dragon Subduing frowned and shouted coldly, today's matter is between Ji Tianqing and me. You two old things, if you back down now, I won't make things difficult for you. Suddenly hearing these words, everyone's expression changed slightly, and a wisp of light flashed in their eyes. This was especially true for Ling Xian. While his face was filled with astonishment, he thought to himself, that's not right. The dragon subduing general had always been overbearing. Given his usual style, he would definitely kill all of them. But he actually took the initiative to concede? Could it be that General Fu Long admits that he is no match for Ji Tianqing, Fairy Yu Qing, and the emissary of the ruins of God? At this moment, Fairy Yu Qing sneered, haha, the dignified leader of the heaven-punishing race is afraid? What a joke! Weren't you acting all high and mighty before and even wanted to kill this old woman's disciple, Luo Shui? Why don't you want to be my enemy now? General Dragon Fu looked at her coldly and said in a low voice, since Luo Shui is dead, my only enemy left is Ji Tianqing. This matter has nothing to do with you. Fairy Yuqing straightened her wide sleeves and said slowly, Nothing to do with it? Ji Tianxing and this old woman's disciple, Luo Shui, are best friends. If you want to kill Ji Tianxing, how can this old woman sit by and do nothing? At this moment, the emissary of the ruins of God had already suppressed his injuries and took out a bronze mask to wear on his face. His voice was as low as muffled thunder, and he said in a dignified tone, General Dragon Fu, put away your clumsy plan. You want to kill Ji Tianxing first, then deal with this old man and Fairy Yuqing? Ha ha ha. The people of the Xinwu continent are not that stupid. This old man and Fairy Yuqing are definitely not people who are afraid of death. Today, let's settle this here and now. The emissary of the ruins of God's words not only exposed General Dragon Fu's scheme, but also completely shattered his fantasies. General Dragon Fu knew that this matter would not be resolved peacefully, so he did not waste any more words. He smiled nastily and said, Very well. Since you are so eager to die, then I will fulfill your wish. The moment he finished speaking, General Dragon Subduing slowly took out a thick and wide blood blade and swung it towards Ji Tianxing. Slaughter of the heavens! The huge blood blade that was 100 meters long lit up with a dazzling blood-red light, and thousands of mysterious images and symbols appeared on the blade. Swish, swish, swish. The blood blade instantly slashed out 4 huge blood-red blades that could split the heavens and earth apart, ruthlessly slashing toward Ji Tianxing. The blades were extremely sharp and carried a murderous aura that could shake one's soul. However, the most powerful thing that Ji Tianxing feared the most was the formless power that descended from the heavens. That was the essence of the Heaven Punisher's power. It could not be seen or touched, but it was as terrifying as the heavens and earth, making it difficult for one to even think of resisting. Ji Tianxing's expression was unprecedentedly solemn. General Dragon Fu was the strongest enemy he had ever faced in his life. He stared at the 4 blood-red blades and gripped the sword of burial of heaven tightly with both hands, exploding with 100% of his divine power. Sword piercing the heavens. With a furious roar, he held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and ruthlessly stabbed out a 1,000-meter-long divine sword light that pierced the heavens from below. Boom! Crack! The huge divine sword went against the formless suppressive power and went against the current, hitting one of the blood-red blades with a loud boom. With a deafening shattering sound, the blood-red blade shattered into pieces and scattered in the sky. Then, the huge divine sword, which had used up almost half of its power, ruthlessly stabbed the second blood-red blade. Boom! 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 The second blood-red blade also collapsed. However, the huge divine sword's power had been used up and it also shattered. However, General Dragon Fu still had 2 more blood-red blades that slashed toward Ji Tianxing with undiminished power. He had no time to counterattack and could only use his divine body to resist. At this critical moment, the messenger of the divine ruins brazenly attacked. Sky-sea parting light, sun and moon shine together. The messenger of the divine ruins shouted in a solemn tone. His palms separated and interlocked, shooting out endless rainbow divine light that respectively struck the 2 blood-red blades. Boom! The rainbow divine light suddenly exploded, turning into billions of dazzling fragments that covered the sky. The 2 blood-red blades also shattered, turning into specks of blood-red light that dissipated in the sky. Ji Tianxing and the messenger of the divine ruins worked together to neutralize General Dragon Fu's divine power. General Dragon Fu was not surprised by this. In fact, he had already expected it. His expression did not change as he waved his blood-red blade again, piercing out blood-red light that filled the sky toward Ji Tianxing. His mountain-like body also released a vast and formless power that pressed down like the collapse of the heavens. Ji Tianxing and the messenger of the divine ruins did not dare to relax. They both used their divine powers with all their might to block and counterattack. At the same time, Fairy Yu Qing and Ling Xian also started fighting. It was hard to tell who had the upper hand in the sky. Originally, Ling Xian only wanted to join forces with General Dragon Fu to kill Ji Tianqing as soon as possible and then retreat. But as soon as he attacked, he was stopped by Fairy Yu Qing. No matter how he tried to break out and dodge, he could not escape from Fairy Yu Qing's entanglement. In his rage, he could only give up on attacking Ji Tianqing and decided to deal with Fairy Yu Qing first. Chapter 2476. Boom, 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 boom. Deafening noises exploded in the sky, reverberating endlessly. The 5 martial gods had all used their divine abilities and secret techniques, and it was difficult to tell who would win. Dazzling rainbow divine light illuminated a radius of 5,000 kilometers, making this area look like a divine realm. Layer after layer of divine power shockwaves spread out like ripples, sweeping through heaven and earth. All the mountain ranges and peaks within a radius of 5,000 kilometers were razed to the ground. The ground had turned into ruins, filled with deep pits and ravines. It was a complete mess. This was a great battle that could destroy heaven and earth. Fortunately, it had happened in the depths of the ruins of God. No matter how much damage it caused, it would not harm the innocent people. At the same time, no one could get close to watch the battle. Otherwise, if this matter were to spread, it would definitely cause a huge uproar in the Xinwu continent. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. The 5 powerhouses were divided into 2 groups, and they had already exchanged tens of thousands of blows. The battlefield had also shifted 30,000 kilometers. Fairy Yu Qing and Ling Xian were still unable to determine a victor, and the battle was very anxious. Both of them were exhausted and in a sorry state. Their bodies were covered in wounds and bloodstains, and they looked like 2 bloody men. Originally, Fairy Yu Qing was a martial god who had been famous for thousands of years, and her strength was extremely strong. Ling Xian had just broken through to the deity realm, and his foundation was still shallow. Logically speaking, it should be easy for Fairy Yu Qing to defeat Ling Xian. However, Fairy Yu Qing had been injured twice in a row, and her injuries had already worsened. She only had about 40% of her strength left. Ling Xian was weaker, but he had inherited the ancestral godfiend's Skyfiend physique, and he had abnormal defense and recovery abilities. Even if his body was covered in bloody holes and wounds, and dozens of demon bones and internal organs could be clearly seen, he could still hold on. On the other side, Ji Tianqing and the Messenger of the Ruins of God were still desperately attacking General Dragon Subduing. Unfortunately, both sides were equally matched. Or rather, it would be more appropriate to say that both sides would suffer. General Dragon Subduing's huge body was covered in hundreds of wounds that crisscrossed, and blood flowed out. Even the black dragon on his left shoulder had its neck severed by Ji Tianqing's god-slaying flying dagger. As for the emissary of the divine ruins and Ji Tianqing's injuries, they were also tragic and had severely weakened their battle prowess. Finally, the power of the emissary of the divine ruins became weaker and weaker, and he could not hold on any longer. He hesitated for a moment before sending a voice transmission to Ji Tianqing. "Kid, it's not a good idea for us to be in a stalemate like this. It's very likely that we'll exhaust our god power and fall into a passive state. The dragon subduing general still has reinforcements, but we don't. We can't die together with him." Ji Tianqing cast his arts to fend off General Dragon Subduing's attacks while sending a voice transmission. "Thank you for your reminder, Senior. I had the same intention as well. Why don't I hold off General Dragon Subduing, while you assist Fairy Yu Qing to get rid of Ling Xian first? Ling Xian's strength is weaker. He can be used as a breakthrough." The emissary of the divine ruins' turbid eyes flashed as he hurriedly nodded in agreement. "That's a good idea. However, you are better at restraining demons than this old man. Therefore, I will hold off General Dragon Subduing while you go and kill Ling Xian." Ji Tianqing was a little hesitant as he asked in a worried tone, Can you hold on? The emissary of the divine ruins answered without hesitation, definitely within half an hour. Ji Tianxing no longer hesitated as he nodded. All right, then be careful. With that, he made a feint at General Dragon subduing and retreated hundreds of miles away. After shaking off General Dragon subduing, he flew across the sky at lightning speed and hurried towards the battlefield 2,000 miles away. There, Fairy Yuqing and Ling Xian were still fighting to the death. Neither of them was willing to back down. Ji Tianxing maintained his invisible state and silently arrived at the battlefield. He lay dormant for a few breaths of time before he found an opportunity to strike. He decisively took out the god-slaying flying dagger. Swoosh! The 3-inch flying dagger cut through the sky and lit up with a dazzling golden light as it ruthlessly pierced towards Ling Xian's back. Ling Xian immediately sensed the danger. His pupils constricted as he used his teleportation skill without even turning his head to dodge the flying dagger. But at this moment, Ji Tianxing's eyes flashed coldly as he brazenly attacked. This is the moment I've been waiting for. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. He abruptly raised his fists and recklessly punched at the empty sky 100 miles in front of him. Kaboom! 2 mountain-like phantoms of dragons and elephants instantly shattered that part of the sky, turning it into a shattered pitch-black void. Violent and devastating shockwaves erupted, mixed with a pitch-black void storm. There was also a figure with a crooked and wretched appearance. That figure was Ling Xian. He had just entered the alternate space, and was in the process of teleporting when Ji Tianxing shattered the space and forcefully squeezed him out. The power of the shattering space far surpassed that of a knife or an axe. It directly shattered his internal organs and meridians. He staggered into the sky and opened his mouth to spit out a large mouthful of blood mixed with many pieces of internal organs. While lifting his sleeve to wipe off the blood stains on his face, he suddenly raised his head to look at Ji Tianxing and roared with a ferocious expression. Ji Tianxing, you despicable and shameless villain, how dare you sneak attack me? Ji Tianxing glanced at him expressionlessly and sneered. Ha, these words coming from your mouth are really ironic. As his voice fell, he held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and activated the power of the heaven-mending orb with all his strength, fiercely slashing out a blazing white giant sword. God-slaying sword. The heaven-mending orb in his mind spewed out endless divine power, which condensed into a 1,000-meter-long giant divine sword through the sword of burial of heaven. Swoosh! The giant divine sword fell from the sky and slashed towards Ling Xian's head with a loud bang. Before the giant sword arrived, the dazzling white light had already illuminated a radius of 3,000 miles, dispelling all the darkness. The terrifying suppressive power sealed an area of 100 miles, causing the space to almost freeze. Ling Xian's body was bent, but he clenched his teeth and held on, recklessly erupting with all his strength. Ji Tianxing, I will never lose to you, don't even think about it. Fallen devil, darkness indestructible. As his angry roar sounded, his burly body suddenly ignited with purple flames that soared into the sky, emitting endless black demonic fog. The purple flames and the black fog mixed together and turned into a vortex that was dozens of miles wide, spinning at an extreme speed. This was the ultimate skill that Ling Xian obtained from the ancestral devil god. He had just succeeded in cultivating it not long ago and had not used it yet. He turned himself into the fallen devil chi. Even if the vortex was destroyed, as long as there was a trace of devil chi, he could recover again. This was the first time he used this ultimate skill. But it was also the last time. Boom! Amidst the deafening loud noise, the giant divine sword ruthlessly stabbed into the devil chi vortex. The vortex spun with all its might, and the purple flames flashed wildly, wrapping around the giant divine sword in a futile attempt to dissolve the power of the giant divine sword. However, the vortex and the giant divine sword were only in a deadlock for a moment before quickly disintegrating like snow under the scorching sun. In just 2 short breaths, all the purple flames and fallen devil chi were purified by the divine light. As a result, Ling Xian also no longer existed, completely dying out. Old Tai, set a small goal first. Remember new 8th Chinese Networko. Chapter 2477. Ling Xian was completely dead. He had just inherited the power and status of the ancestor fiend god and was about to lead the demon race to glory. He had thought that he would be the one laughing in the end. But the truth was the opposite. He had just gone out with General Dragon subduing for the first time and had died under Ji Tianqing's sword. It was too depressing, too surprising. Swoosh! A black stone the size of a fist fell from the sky. This was the boundless divine stone that General Dragon subduing had given to Ling Xian. When Ling Xian and Fairy Yuqing were fighting, he had used this divine stone several times to resolve fatal dangers. Unfortunately, Ling Xian did not have the chance to use it during the battle with Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out a dazzling golden light, grabbing the boundless divine stone in his palm. He only looked at it twice before putting it into his space ring to study it in the future. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Fairy Yuqing took out 2 divine pills and swallowed them, circulating her energy to suppress her injuries. She did not waste any time and hurriedly asked Ji Tianqing, "How is the old man? Let's go and help him, otherwise he won't be able to hold on." Ji Tianqing nodded and brought her to the messenger of the divine ruins and General Dragon subduing. When the 2 of them arrived near the battlefield, they saw General Dragon subduing attacking fiercely, forcing the messenger of the divine ruins to retreat. In just a few breaths, the messenger of the divine ruins had been stabbed 3 times, and blood spurted out. But he stubbornly held on and fought General Dragon subduing with all his might. Originally, when Ji Tianqing left the battle, General Dragon subduing chased after him without any regard. The messenger of the divine ruins had used all his skills to stall General Dragon subduing. General Dragon subduing could not escape and was about to kill the messenger of the divine ruins in anger before dealing with Ji Tianqing. But before he could kill the messenger of the divine ruins, Ji Tianqing and Fairy Yuqing had arrived. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Fairy Yuqing appear, General Dragon subduing's expression darkened and a look of shock flashed across his eyes. Of course, he could guess that Ling Xian was most likely dead. Previously, he had brought Ling Xian, the 12 captains, and dozens of heaven-punishing clan warriors with him. Now, everyone had died in battle, and he was the only one left. The strong sense of defeat caused him to be filled with rage, and he even had the intention to retreat. He had a premonition that this operation was going to fail. With his strength, it was basically impossible for him to defeat Ji Tianqing, the messenger of the divine ruins, and Fairy Yuqing. This was indeed the case. When Ji Tianqing and Fairy Yuqing joined the battle, the pressure on General Dragon subduing instantly increased. The situation was completely reversed. The dragon subduing general was besieged by 3 people and immediately fell into a disadvantage. Ji Tianqing's killing intent rose, and he wanted to take the chance to get rid of the dragon subduing general to prevent any future troubles. Therefore, he did not hold back at all and used his strongest killer move. The god-slaying flying knife was also hiding at the side, ready to deal a fatal blow to the dragon subduing general. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. Rising Sword. Boom 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 boom. Earth-shattering sounds kept erupting, and dazzling divine light bloomed, covering thousands of miles. The 2 sides exchanged over 300 moves, shattering the sky within several thousand li. The ground had also turned into a vast expanse of ruins. Finally, the dragon subduing general's injuries were too severe, and he could not hold on any longer. There was not a single piece of flesh on his body that was intact, and he was covered with crisscrossing wounds and bloody holes. The 2 black dragons that extended from his shoulders had their necks cut off, and blood flowed freely. Especially on his forehead, there was a long and narrow sword wound that extended all the way to the center of his brows. Just a little more and his head would have been cut off by the sword of burial of heaven. Also, the dragon subduing general's strength was rapidly weakening, and he only had about 50% of his combat strength left. He knew very well that if he continued to fight, he might be killed on the spot. Damn it. Looks like there's no way to get rid of Ji Tianxing today. I can only think of a long-term plan. The dragon subduing general gritted his teeth and immediately decided to retreat. He waved his blood blade with all his might, forcing Ji Tianxing and the messenger of the divine ruins to retreat. Then, he formed a seal with his left hand, and his body lit up with dark red blood light. With a swoosh, he broke through the sky. With a flash of blood light, he escaped into an alternate space and disappeared. Ji Tianxing, the messenger of the divine ruins, and Fairy Yu Qing immediately released their divine senses and used their spatial powers to search for his traces and aura. However, the dragon subduing general had already passed through several layers of alternate spaces and moved thousands of miles away. Even if the three of them wanted to kill him, they had no way to do so. Helpless, Ji Tianxing, the messenger of the divine ruins, and Fairy Yu Qing could only give up. Damn it. He actually escaped. It will be difficult to kill him next time. Ji Tianxing gritted his teeth, his heart filled with anger. The messenger of the divine ruins was also filled with regret. He coughed and said, "No wonder the heaven punishers are invincible and no one can stop them. The dragon subduing general's strength is really terrifying." Fairy Yu Qing nodded in agreement. Logically speaking, he is only at the 8th level of the martial god realm and is on par with us. But his battle experience is so rich that it's terrifying, and the number of divine abilities and ultimate skills he has mastered is as numerous as the hairs on an ox. Ji Tianxing suppressed his anger and said calmly, "Seniors, don't worry. Even if the dragon subduing general escapes today, he will only be struggling at death's door and live for a few more months. Now that his wings have been cut off, he is alone and can no longer invade and expand." Seeing that he was full of confidence, the messenger of the divine ruins and Fairy Yu Qing also calmed down. The three of them were silent and the atmosphere was awkward and gloomy. Ji Tianxing cupped his hands and bowed to the two of them, breaking the silence. "I never thought that the two of you would help me at such a critical moment. I, Ji Tianxing, will remember this kindness in my heart and will never forget it." The messenger of the divine ruins waved his hand and said in a solemn tone, "There is no need to be so polite. The dragon subduing general is from another race and wants to invade the entire Shenwu continent. At this moment of life and death, we should join forces to fight against the enemy." Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and said, "Senior's injuries are so tragic. It is better for you to go back and recuperate early to avoid any future troubles." The messenger of the divine ruins nodded to show that he understood and said in a complicated tone, "I know that after you recover from your injuries, you will definitely find the dragon subduing general for revenge and eliminate the root of the problem. Although I want to help you, I can't leave the divine ruins, so I can't help you. After all, I am only a mausoleum keeper." Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Senior, you worry too much. I have my own ways to deal with the dragon subduing general." The messenger of the divine ruins did not say anything else and bid farewell to him and Fairy Yu Qing before turning to leave. In the sky, only Fairy Yu Qing and Ji Tianxing were left. Ji Tianxing looked at Fairy Yu Qing and said, "Thank you for your help, Fairy Yu Qing." Fairy Yu Qing waved her hand and said earnestly, "You don't have to thank me. The reason why I helped was because I had my own selfish motives. Just like how I helped Luo Shui back then, I had the same thought. I only hope that the two of you won't hold a grudge against Luo Shui. After Yun Yao inherits Goddess Yaoguang's inheritance, don't forget to unlock the world seal and give all the martial gods a chance of survival and hope."